Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome everyone watching on ITV and via live stream to the July 21st, 2020 special meeting to order with all board members present via Zoom webinar. To begin, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we are now going to begin our workshop of Freedom Summer 2020, Building Anti-Racist School Communities. And to begin, I would like to just read a very brief quote from our tribute last time we met a couple of times ago regarding George Floyd. This was a quote from Ijeoma Oluo. I'm not near anybody, so I can remove my mask now. Maybe you can understand me a little better. The beauty of anti-racism is that you don't have to pretend to be free of racism to be an anti-racist. Anti-racism is the commitment to fight racism wherever you find it, including in yourself. And it's the only way forward. And very fitting for the situation of this workshop today, we want to begin with a tribute to Congressman John Lewis, civil rights hero, who passed away this weekend and had multiple visits to San Diego, and we're going to see a little bit of that right now.
When we arrived at the apex of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, we saw a sea of blue, Alabama state troopers. About 600 of us.
John Lewis was never worried about getting into good trouble, as he called it. And now we're remembering the man who produced so much that was good for the country, including San Diego. Lewis stood shoulder to shoulder with Martin Luther King Jr. during the civil rights movement in the 1960s. In 1965, Lewis took a bloody beating by troopers in his home state of Alabama during a peaceful voting rights march from Selma to Montgomery. That day would come to be known as Bloody Sunday.
Disperse, you're ordered to disperse, go home or go to your church. This march will not continue.
In 2014 through Skype, Congressman Lewis took time out of his schedule to connect with third grade students from Oak Park Elementary School, arranged by teacher Mick Rabin.
So I'm going to have Congressman Lewis say hello now, okay?
Hello? Hi, how you doing?
The students asked the congressman questions about civil rights, peaceful protesting, and just about anything else.
Can you tell us a little bit about the picture?
Yes, I was arrested the first time on February the 27th, 1960 in Nashville for sitting in at lunch counters.
The following year, promoting a comic book version of the legendary Selma March, he led an impromptu walk through the main corridor of the San Diego Convention Center during Comic-Con. Some of Rabin's students who showed up joined the line with Lewis right then and there. The San Diego Parade of Purpose, as the Washington Post described it, marked that historic day in Alabama a half-century before, which helped turn the tide in the struggle for civil rights in the United States.
Congressman Lewis is just amazing. To actually get a chance to meet a civil rights leader who's actually been in the trenches and still living to tell this story, leaving a legacy, is one of the greatest things that has empowered my life as well as my students.
In 2018, Lewis spoke to students at Morse High School. He urged a gym full of students to vote, saying some people over the years had given their lives for that right. He urged students to, quote, never give up and never give in.
One of you one day could be the mayor of the city, the governor of the state, the president of the United States of America, could be a great teacher, a great lawyer, a doctor, school superintendent, secretary of state. So hang in there, keep your faith. It's all gonna work out, but you got to have it work out. You can do it.
As a young man, Lewis began organizing sit-in demonstrations at whites-only lunch counters and volunteering as a freedom rider, enduring beatings and arrests while traveling around the South to challenge segregation. Lewis turned to politics in 1981 when he was elected to the Atlanta City Council. He won his seat in Congress in 1986. Lewis said he'd been arrested 40 times in the 1960s and 5 more while serving as a congressman. A tweet by Lewis from 2 years ago may have summed up his philosophy best. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. John Lewis died July 17th from pancreatic cancer at the age of 80.
That was a wonderful tribute to Congressman Lewis. And now, in terms of the agenda that we have today, is on this particular special board workshop, is a result of the Board of Education adopting a resolution on June 23rd, 2020, supporting a call for Freedom Summer 2020 to focus on the barriers that prevent our students of color from receiving an equitable education. This was to be led by the superintendent, to include the Department of Youth Advocacy, to focus on issues of racial justice and equity. Looking at the district's key strategies in this area, we wanted to have a student voice as we build anti-racist and restorative school communities to include such topics as staff diversity, implementation of ethnic studies for all students, interrupting discriminatory grading practices, dismantling discriminatory discipline policies and practices, and building anti-racist and restorative school communities. This is a broad range that we're looking at in terms of our schools. And now I would like to turn it over to Superintendent Cindy Martin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Evans, and for working with me through the weekend, Dr. Evans, to help with our communications team to put that piece together to open up today's special workshop. This is a time for defiance. And I have a quote from historian Howard Zinn, who said, "The future is an infinite succession of presents, and to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory." And I think back to when Sarah Collins Rudolph, who was the lone survivor of the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in Birmingham in 1963, when she came to our district a few years ago, and she told her students at Lincoln High School about African Americans who are facing police violence just as it happened during the civil rights movement. And she said to the students, "It seems like we're going backwards." It's clear that many thousands of Americans who have taken to the streets over the past few months, unwilling to go backwards. We are unwilling to go backwards. It's a time that we confront institutional racism. We root out hatred that leads to murder. Ever since our country has faced these difficult challenges, we've all been waiting for things to get back to normal. And the death of George Floyd is a reminder that normal is not good enough. We need to go forward, not backwards. As a school system, we're committed to doing more than getting back to normal. Congressman John Lewis said, "You are a light. You are a light. Never let anyone, any person, or any force dampen, dim, or diminish your light. Study the path of others to make your way easier and more abundant. That's from his 2017 memoir, Across That Bridge, A Vision for Change and the Future of America. You are a light, and I'd like to begin the light of one of our students to open today's workshop as I introduce Leilani Robinson. Thank you, Leilani.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Superintendent Martin, Board President Dr. Evans, and trustees. My name is Leilani Robinson, and I am a senior at the San Diego Met High School. I am honored to be opening today's Freedom 2020 workshop focused on building anti-racist and restorative school communities. As a student at the Met, I want to share that being at the school has allowed me to come out of my shell, not just academically, but also socially. I have had to learn how to communicate with all of my classmates, and with adults because of our passion project. Internships and exhibitions, which means I have to be able to talk about my ideas and listen to my classmates. I'm also happy to say that I have a relationship with every teacher because of how close the teachers are. I want you to know how important relations are to me. Everyone who works at the Met wants to be a mentor to us. They are all friendly, and we can tell they really care about us even when we make mistakes. Having a positive relationship with teachers can help students succeed, especially when it's a student who doesn't normally feel like school is the place for them. One teacher in particular that I had is Miss Jill Chiodini. She was my advisor for my first 2 years of high school. And while I had to move to another advisory, she still cares about me. I know this is true because of how much she still checks in with me. I also want you to know that as a female student of color, I believe that there should be diversity on the staff. Diversity will help students grow knowing that there is someone at the school who looks like them. While the woman I first connected with didn't necessarily look like me, having teachers of various backgrounds means my classmates have all been able to find comfort. I'm also glad that the topic of anti-racism is taking center stage. To me, that means that everyone who works in San Diego school will actively take racism apart and will be able to talk about the hard parts. If you were really anti-racist in San Diego, that would mean if two kids got in trouble for the same thing and they are of two different ethnicities, they would receive the same result. What I mean by that is they would both be listened to and each student would be held to the same standard. In all honesty, many racist issues in schools just get a slap on the wrist or get swept under the rug. We have to know that our teachers and principals would do something and will address the issues consistently. It shouldn't matter which school you attend or who is addressing the issue. Any instances of racism should be met with the same strong reaction. I know that some kids do things that get them in trouble. For most things that happen, I think schools should listen instead of punishing. The reason why is because students will be grateful that they're being heard instead of instantly getting disciplined. The students will also be more likely to build trust with that adult if they are being heard. The only way we can treat our school as a place made for us to learn is if the adults help us understand. When the schools care more about the rule than the person, that is what makes everything feel so unfair. As a student in this district, I believe that we should really think about how we can better ourselves. Not just the teachers and faculty, but the students as well. If the students are given teachers who care about their well-being and their mental state, then I think that many students will be happier at school. I want you to know that being at school is a place where many students go to get away from home and other problems they're facing. And to be treated unfairly isn't something that they're looking for. We're all just looking for the same treatment that everyone else gets, and that means that everyone understands our reality. I really hope that we all get the chance to be heard and to grow from our experiences. I would like to thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts, and now I would like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Sophia Rodini, Chief of Leadership and Learning.
Thank you so much, Leilani. Going to make sure our presentation is ready to go. Thank you, Leilani, for your powerful and beautiful words. Today's Freedom Summer 2020 workshop is about becoming an anti-racist district and building anti-racist and restorative school communities. This workshop is inspired by Freedom Summer in 1964 and will focus on dismantling inequitable and racist practices in our district. Ever since Cindy's appointment as a superintendent in 2013, her message has been constant. She reminds us every day that we are about equity, that we give more to the students who need more, and that we do it unapologetically. Time, resources, and countless hours have been dedicated to eliminating the disproportionality in the achievement and experiences of our Black students. Our funding model is based on equity. In 2016, our Board of Education approved A through G for All, which raised graduation expectations for all students in an effort to eliminate tracking. We also instituted master schedule expectations for our secondary schools, which provides schools a framework for scheduling all students in rigorous coursework. As a district, we've partnered with equity leaders across the nation that have helped us shape our equity work. The National Equity Project, Pedro Noguera, Yvette Jackson, and Jeff Howard. This coming year, we're bringing Zaretta Hammond and Bettina Love as keynote speakers to our institutes for leaders and educators. And just last year, our district was recognized in a study authored by Linda Darling Hammond and published by the Learning Policy Institute titled California's Positive Outliers, Districts Beating the Odds. This report acknowledged our district's deliberate plan for advancing equity and making gains for underperforming students. In our words and in our actions, we demonstrate the fact that the lives of Black students matter to us. Yet, we have to acknowledge that even with all of our efforts, it has not been enough. So it's time to take bolder steps. We start by deepening the conversation so it's not just about equity, but rather eliminating all racist practices and any system that advantages some students while disadvantaging others. In a recent interview, Angela Davis talked about the murder of George Floyd and the protests that followed. In her interview, she stated, "Racism is institutionalized and is embedded in every fabric of this country." She also said that the anti-racist consciousness is developing in this country, and it's time for self-examination, transformation, and action. The real work happens after the protest. Our superintendent constantly inspires us to consider, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? We are ready for real action. In our efforts toward becoming an anti-racist district and eliminate the inequities and disproportionalities, we will focus on the following strategies. We will invest in what we value and in the actions that will make a real difference for our students. We will change the policies that perpetuate inequities, and we will support our schools, leaders, and educators every step of the way. It's not okay that our students can't recall if they've ever had a Black teacher. It's not okay for our students not to see themselves in the curriculum being taught in our classrooms. It's not okay for our Black and brown students to feel so disconnected from school that they stop trying to pass their classes. And it's not okay for our Black students to be suspended and expelled from school at disproportionate rates. In today's workshop, we will cover 4 approaches to building anti-racist and restorative school communities. The 4 approaches are staff diversity, ethnic studies, grading, and student discipline. Each approach will be co-presented with a student, and it will include data, information from think tanks, and students' perspectives. The reality is we can't talk about race by simply concentrating on numbers and quantities and percentages, and therefore we have planned for an honest dialogue with students to listen to their experiences and their perspectives. In preparation for this board presentation, we've engaged our stakeholders by listening closely to their perspectives about the 4 approaches in this presentation. dialogue about the uniform discipline policy began almost a year ago. Also, within the last month, we've conducted both think tanks and focus group meetings. Over 200 educators, administrators, and students participated in our think tanks. Over 80 educators participated in our focus group on student discipline. That was educators, administrators, and students as well. Our presenters have engaged in countless hours of examining issues of race and inequity within our district. And today, we have 6 students co-presenting with us and a cohort of students joining us for a dialogue toward the end of the presentation. We approach this work with courage, vulnerability, and love, which are all essential for this call to action. James Baldwin reminds us of this, and although I'm not going to read the entire quote to you, I will highlight its core message. Baldwin says, particularly for those who deal with the minds and hearts of young people, I'm going to pause there because that's us. Superintendent Martin, board trustees, district leaders, my fellow presenters, and every educator in the district. This message is for us. In 1963, Baldwin said, "We must go for broke. We must be willing to risk it all to make a real difference for Black students. And we must be prepared to be met with resistance, because the resistance will be brutal and inevitable." Our educators and every single adult in our school who has the opportunity to work with our students plays a critical role in developing the anti-racist and restorative communities that our students deserve. So this is what we expect from our adults. We expect our adults to be reflective and develop critical self-awareness in order to realize the impact of their implicit bias and unconscious microaggressions. We expect our adults to build warm and demanding alliances with students and adequately prepare them for the future of tomorrow in ways that bring students joy and confidence. We expect our adults to give students voice and choice, to give them experiences that unlock their own genius and leadership. We are committed to being in partnership with our educators, paraeducators, and all site-based personnel to actualize anti-racist and restorative school communities. In addition to having high expectations for our educators and staff, we also have high expectations for our students. Our graduate profile includes social emotional competencies we will strengthen in all of our students. I believe it's fair to say that our students will be graduating into the most diverse, emotionally charged, and divided country we've ever had in recent history. And it's our job to ensure that all students are equipped with the knowledge, skills, and the social emotional intelligence they'll need to thrive in our ever-changing world. We want our graduates to enter college or the workforce with the following competencies: social and interpersonal skills to interact and collaborate with others, cognitive and executive functioning skills to think critically and solve problems, emotional skills to have empathy and compassion toward everyone they encounter, social justice skills to make a positive difference in the world, and a growth mindset and positive attitude to reach their full potential. The truth is that many of our students of color already have many of these skills. They've developed and demonstrated these skills, such as resiliency and grit, as they navigate what it means to grow up Black or brown in America. Our educators' job is to unlock these skills, which may already be within our students. Give them opportunities to practice these skills in new situations, and opportunities for students to model these skills for other students who haven't mastered them yet. Now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Acacia Thede, Chief Human Resource Officer, and her 2 co-presenters, Brianna Brown and Jasmine Taylor, as we delve into our first approach, staff diversity.
Thank you, Sophia and Leilani. As Dr. Sophia shared, My name is Acacia Thede, and I serve as the Chief Human Resource Officer for the San Diego Unified School District. My co-presenters, Jasmine and Brianna, are honored to speak with you today on the positive student impacts of a diverse workforce. As an organization, we have never wavered in our commitment to increasing the diversity of educators in our classrooms because we understand representation matters. Numerous studies demonstrate that all students, including white students, benefit from having teachers of color because they bring distinctive knowledge, experiences, and role modeling to the student body as a whole. For the past 7 years, we have made a concerted effort to increase the diversity of our staff. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, the nationwide average of diverse educators is 20%. Through our focused efforts in this time span, we have increased the percentage of diverse educators to 34%, far above the nationwide average. This increase has been accomplished through the implementation of significant changes in recruitment and selection, as well as the development of multiple entry points via the development of our teacher pipeline programs. These teacher pipelines include the San Diego Education Fund Scholars, which provides both monetary and mentoring support for students who graduate from our district and enroll in local programs. There are currently over 150 former SDEF scholars who have completed their education and who are now working across 75 schools in San Diego. The Teacher Pipeline Inclusion Program is a partnership with San Diego Mesa and National University, focused on enrolling diverse students with an emphasis in science, math, and special education. We are in discussions with UCSD to launch a pipeline to bring high school students into the field of education and return them to the district. We are also in discussions with our other university partners to develop these similar programs. Our internships are some of the most powerful teacher pipelines that we have. We currently have 8 partnerships with 8 teacher education programs around San Diego County. Although we have made progress, and although we are well above the national average, this first chart shows our teachers do not currently reflect the diversity of our students. Our Black and Latinx students aren't able to see themselves represented in classrooms on a regular basis. This leads us to ask, what else can we do? Schools across California and across the nation are focused on increasing the diversity of teachers in the classroom. Unfortunately, we are all recruiting from the same small pool of candidates. In California, Proposition 209, which effectively ended affirmative action, devastated the number of Black educators in the state. The second chart compares the 20-year period since Proposition 209 became effective. When comparing the increase in Latinx educators to the decrease in Black educators, we see the disproportionate impacts of Prop 209 within our state and our district. Our recruitment and pipeline strategies won't ever be enough if the number of diverse candidates continues to be inadequate. This is why we need both legislative relief to increase the number of diverse candidates who are accepted into teacher education preparation programs, as well as strong partnerships with these programs to support these candidates to complete their programs and return to service in the district. Later in this section, we will present actions on both of these items. Now that I've shared with you where we are, I am so excited to have my co-presenters, Jasmine and Brianna, share with you why representation matters for students. Following their discussions, we will share with you the actions we will take to increase the number of diverse educators to ensure they stay.
Hello, my name is Jasmine, and I currently go to James Madison High School, and I'll be a senior this year, and I'm very excited to present on staff diversity. So, as children, we look up to the oldest and the leaders in our lives. Through experience, we are met with different teachers from different walks of life. Through their own experiences, they influence our own students' lives. As a student in the San Diego Unified School District, when we are met with teachers that are empathetic to us, we are open to discussing more about ourselves. With the ability to talk to students about our experiences can help to understand how racism invades most of our lives. With open talks to students about these experiences can help for students to understand their students transparently. With teachers from various backgrounds, whether POC or LGBTQ, can understand these struggles through their own experiences. With these experiences, they can create and nurture environments where students feel welcomed and wanted. And an increase of students with various backgrounds can help propagate change into a direction where inclusivity can be shown to students from young ages that can shape their own experiences. During my junior year, I was able to have a teacher who was able to truly talk about racism's effects in American society from the beginning to now. Being able to have a teacher with a different perspective on a subject so broad as racism helped everyone in the class to realize each other's privileges over others. With understanding comes actions, and I truly believe that enabling us as a district to be able to have more inclusive hiring practices can help our students push for changes that they want to see.
Hello, I'm Brianna Brown. I'm a senior at Hoover High School. As a student of color, I've never really seen a teacher of color or really in diversity till well into my years of schooling at the district. Once I met my first diverse teacher, I was ecstatic and couldn't wait to get taught by this teacher. But it was a different type of excitement than having like a fun teacher or upbeat teacher. It's a teacher who looked like me and had different skin color than I was normally seeing. And it was a place where I saw someone who was my race that could be a successful person and could teach anyone. Having a diverse staff is more than just having teachers who look like you, though. It is building a culture that shows that no matter what someone's skin color is, they can teach, they can shape the minds of the young, and it's possible. Also, having a diverse staff can help students experience school and help understand conflict. When students have conflict or something happens that makes them uncomfortable, it can completely change the outcome of how they treat school and how they act. And having a diverse staff member around can help them solve the conflict because they have someone who will get their point of views. As a freshman at Hoover High School, I had my own type of experience with a teacher, but this time it was a sub. It involved a racial slur and during an English class that made me very uncomfortable. And as a freshman, I had no one to go to because I didn't know a diverse teacher because there wasn't any that I've met yet my freshman year. But then within this conflict, I remembered what my first diverse teachers told me, who was a Black woman in my 7th grade year in English, told me that getting emotional was a way that Black people were branded as something that was bad, but also that being emotional was something to be proud of because it means you cared about something. And with this experience, and I learned that having someone who's diverse around teaches you lessons in life that others may not, and also helps you understand more problems in the world that you can't get from any other teacher. But the point of this example is not just saying that diverse staff members need to happen. It's a must. This situation caused me pain, caused me being uncomfortable, and I learned from it and I grew from it. But this happens all across the world, all across the states, and sometimes there won't be a student who's strong enough to handle this, and they won't have a diverse teacher there, and that is an issue. But not only do we need to teach students and teachers about diversity, but we also need to teach the teachers who sub in for those teachers, because when the teachers have the training, but the teachers who step in might not. And that's important because having diversity builds a community, and having it at all levels of the school district will make the place more welcoming and more accepting.
Thank you, ladies. Your experiences and recommendations echo the research related to why representation matters for the success of students. Members of the board and the public, you heard from two powerful voices. This is the third student who's spoken today, and you're going to hear from many more. And their stories are so meaningful and powerful. When we met with our think tanks, not only did we discuss the recruitment and selection process, but we also discussed the importance of retaining teachers of colors at the sites where they are needed most. Our think tank was passionate about the need to retain teachers of color in the sites where they are most needed. They shared examples of working to recruit and select teachers only to have them be displaced shortly after they had been hired. As I shared earlier, we've made concerted efforts over the past 7 years to increase the diversity of our teaching workforce. The combination of declining enrollment, the statutory last in, first out requirements when eliminating positions, as well as the contractual preference of more senior teachers weighted over newly hired educators means our diverse educators will consistently be in a state of turnover unless we make some changes. We must engage in dialogues at the state and local level to ensure these requirements do not continue to negatively impact our diverse educators. Most importantly, our think tanks shared the importance of ensuring safe and inclusive environments for adults and students. Schools and workplaces must actively affirm the humanity and racial identity of the individual. You heard Brianna's story. You heard the effect that an adult who can affirm the humanity of the child isn't key to a child being connected. On this slide, you will see a link to a 2019 report from the Education Trust titled, "If You Listen, We Will Stay: Why Teachers of Color Leave and How to Disrupt Teacher Turnover." Just as we expect safe and inclusive environments for our students, we should expect them for the adults who work on campuses. In this report, teachers of color share they leave the profession because they are not valued, because they are seen as disciplinarians, for Black male teachers in particular, and overall, their work is discounted and devalued. In an anti-racist community, we must empower teachers of color by ensuring curriculum and learning and work environments are inclusive and respectful of all racial ethnic groups. One of the recommendations you will hear throughout our presentation today will be the creation of site equity teams. These teams will be groups of people working together to implement the actions approved by the board this evening. We believe site equity teams would allow us to provide spaces for learning and develop and strengthen commitments we make to diversity in hiring and creating these safe and inclusive environments. We believe the actions presented in this slide establish the conditions necessary for anti-racist and a restorative approach when it comes to staff diversity. The first action is to establish a diversity and inclusion officer who will serve to recruit district students to enter the teacher pipeline and educators to enter a new leadership pipeline that we intend to launch this fall. The Diversity and Inclusion Officer will partner with the educator preparation programs to ensure successful completion in order for these educators to return to our district and serve our students. We also will have the Diversity and Inclusion Officer work alongside district and site leaders to leverage best practices and resources across our systems to promote a culture of inclusion for current and future educators. To ensure we select diverse candidates, every school and department will have a trained hiring panel to mitigate bias and to increase the selection of diverse candidates. Our intention is to work with Jones Consulting, whose CEO, Dr. Stephen Jones, is known nationally as one of America's top experts on leadership, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Once these diverse staff have been hired, we must ensure a safe and inclusive environment for our employees. Therefore, site equity teams will lead the review of data and dialogue in support of the development of culturally affirming workplaces. While we can build internal structures and supports to retain and recruit diverse staff, The board made a bold statement on June 23rd by approving a resolution in support of ACA 5, which, if passed, will remove the ban on affirmative action in our state. As I mentioned earlier, we saw that Proposition 209 disproportionately has affected Black educators. When this constitutional amendment is approved, teacher preparation programs can increase their diversity efforts more than they've already doing. At the same time, we will continue to strengthen our dedicated partnerships with universities and colleges to increase the number of diverse candidates in teacher education programs and those who come to us. Finally, in collaboration with our bargaining units, we can review our process to allow diverse educators to remain in schools where they are needed. For your approval tonight, we have two specific actions in support of increasing our staff diversity and ensuring anti-racist restorative work environments. After hearing from our students and their desires for a changed experience, as well as staff recommendation, we will ask the board to approve the development of a staff position and the funding needed to serve alongside district and site leaders to increase diversity and coordinate the various teacher pipelines to provide safe and inclusive environments. This is the position of the Diversity and Inclusion Officer. We also ask the board to include and continue to support legislative changes to increase diversity in teacher education preparation programs and support collaboration with our bargaining units to remove barriers that prevent the selection and retention of diverse educators. On behalf of my co-presenters, Jasmine and Brianna, we thank you. Next, we will turn it to our instructional support officer, Wendy Rankber, and Maya Castorina, who will discuss implementing culturally responsive curriculum and instructional practices through ethnic studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Acacia, Jasmine, and Brianna. My name is Wendy Rankber, and I serve as an instructional support officer. My co-presenter is Maya Castorena, a senior at Sarah High School. Maya and I will be speaking about ethnic studies and the implementation of culturally responsive and sustaining curriculum and instructional practices. Implementing culturally responsive and sustaining curriculum and practices will certainly benefit all students, but it will not be enough. In order for us to become an anti-racist and socially just system, we must also work to humanize and decolonize both our curriculum and our instructional practices. Across every content area and grade level in our system, we must look critically at the content and ask ourselves, whose stories are being told, whose stories are missing or are misrepresented, and why? This critical examination of our curriculum and instructional practices must be done at every level and in all content areas, not only because our students deserve this, but our society demands it for the health of our nation and the strength of our democracy. Ethnic studies is gaining attention across the state and the nation as an educational response to the Black Lives Matters movement. However, ethnic studies has its roots in education since the 1960s. Additionally, this work is not new to San Diego Unified educators. We have a committed group of educators, community leaders, and university faculty who have been our partners in this work through our District Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee. Our district has been leading the way across our state to ensure that ethnic studies is inclusive and responsive to all underrepresented and marginalized groups throughout our society. If we are to succeed in our efforts to create an anti-racist and socially just educational system, we must leverage everyone in our system to help all of our students develop a deeper understanding of their multiple identities and how those identities shape how they perceive the world and interact with others. In San Diego Unified, we have started this work, but we are not finished. Let me share the progress that we have made to date in the area of ethnic studies. We have offered over 100 hours of professional development specific to ethnic studies and our new history courses at the high school level. In this professional development, we have not only focused on the content to teach in these courses, but how to teach it and assess it using an anti-racist, anti-bias approach. We have also rewritten the US history and world history courses to include the perspectives of historically marginalized groups, with a specific emphasis on the use of identity and power within a historical context. For example, in our new US history course, students are required to read critically and to analyze documents from a broad range of sources and authors, including W.E.B. Du Bois, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, and many others who represent the diversity of our society and our history. Our new Modern World History course, titled Power and Identity Around the World, was just approved by the University of California system on July the 9th. This means that students in San Diego Unified School District can now take a series of history courses from grade 9 through grade 12 that are UC approved, aligned to the California State History and Social Science Framework, and also incorporate the essential components of ethnic studies. At this time, we have 16 courses that are taught from an ethnic studies perspective in our district. Most of these courses have been taught at some of our school sites for more than 5 years, and we will continue to add courses across grade levels and content areas as we move forward. We have also collaborated with Facing History and the Simon Wiesenthal Center to support our professional development. We initiated this collaboration to ensure that we are including the perspectives of historically marginalized religious groups. As leaders in the field of ethnic studies, we understand the historical roots of ethnic studies and the need to be responsive and community-based. Our communities have spoken, and we have heard them. At San Diego Unified School District, we are committed to the needs of our students and the development of ethnic studies courses that challenge racism and oppression in all of its forms and promotes teaching from a critical pedagogical perspective centering on student experiences. As a result of our collaboration with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, we began using and embedding the social justice standards from Teaching Tolerance, and we include them in our curriculum and in our professional development, TK to 12. We have also created a history social science website that has high quality links to curriculum resources from leaders in the field, including Teaching Tolerance, the Stanford History Education Group, Facing History, and from curriculum writers from across our district. Our Integrated Youth Services team has created identity-based curriculum modules and have provided anti-racist and anti-bias professional development to teachers and leaders across our district. It is this kind of work across departments, divisions, schools, and grade levels that we must continue in order to be successful and advance this work. We also have a very engaged Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee made up of 20 members who are teachers, administrators, university faculty, parents, and community leaders. This group gives generously of their time and stays engaged with district leadership in an advisory role for our work in ethnic studies. Some of the teachers on this committee have been curriculum writers and presenters for our district professional development. One measure that we use to monitor our progress in the implementation of ethnic studies is course enrollment. This graph shows the growth of ethnic studies course enrollment in our district from 2018-19 in blue to 2019-20 in orange. As you can see, we have seen growth in enrollment in these courses. However, the growth in enrollment must be accelerated. Our students are waiting. To illustrate this, I would like to focus on the rewritten U.S. history course titled Identity and Agency in U.S. History. That course is represented in the far right side of this graph. That course specifically calls for students to examine U.S. history from multiple perspectives, including the perspectives of groups that have been historically marginalized. This course is the first ethnic studies course in our district that meets both a state graduation requirement as well as the district ethnic studies requirement. In 2018-19, the course was piloted and we offered 55 hours of professional development to our U.S. history teachers. In 2019-20, all of our schools in our district had access to the course. However, only 3 out of 28 of our high schools currently offered the course. When we compare the 2 U.S. history courses currently available to our students, you can see in the box to the right that we had 827 enrollments. Each enrollment represents 1 semester for a total of about 400 students in the new U.S. history course. This is compared to the traditional U.S. history course that had 6,361 enrollments, representing 3,150 of our students. This data clearly indicates the need to require ethnic studies courses if we expect our students to be able to reap the benefits and rewards that these courses offer, including what research has shown us, that students have better attendance, higher grades, and increased engagement in school when they complete an ethnic studies course. Our board recognized this need and approved an ethnic studies graduation requirement for all students, beginning with the class of 2024, which is the incoming freshman class for fall of 2020. I would now like to turn to Maya, my student co-presenter, who will offer her perspective on why ethnic studies matters. When Maya completes her presentation, I will share information from our think tanks and the actions we will be taking to advance this work forward. Maya?
Hi, thank you. My name is Maya Castorena, and I am of Hispanic Latina descent. Throughout all of my years in this district, I have never once read a book by a Hispanic or Latino author, male or female, in school. And I have rarely ever heard about Mexican or Hispanics in history, at least their perspective. And I learned very little about the perspective of African Americans in history. And I used to think maybe my history didn't have a purpose. Wasn't meant to be learned. But now I'm finding it's most important that we learn about these different perspectives and how learning about others' struggles and the cultures, it allows for a greater acceptance and understanding of what people face today, despite or no matter what their race is. And I just want to say ethnic studies matters because it makes you feel that your culture and your history has a purpose and that it's worth learning in school. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. This quote from our think tanks captures the thoughts of many of our students and echoes the statements from Maya. Students told us when they do not see themselves in the curriculum, they feel a lack of belonging. Furthermore, our educators added that when the curriculum is not inclusive and relevant to our students, we are missing opportunities for real-world, relevant, deep learning in many areas. Our progress so far in ethnic studies and input from students, staff, and families help to guide our next steps and actions. In order to achieve our vision of becoming an anti-racist, socially just, and restorative district, we must set goals for ourselves, identify actions we need to take to get there, and monitor our progress along the way. Our first action is to increase course enrollment in ethnic studies so that every student in the class of 2024 will graduate with at least one ethnic studies course. Next, we are developing an ethnic studies micro-credential because it's not simply enough to implement an ethnic studies course. That course must be taught with fidelity, with teachers who understand both the content and the instructional practices that constitute a strong ethnic studies experience for students. So we will be providing ongoing professional development and creating a micro-credential that will acknowledge the expertise of our teachers as a result of their participation in ongoing professional development. We will develop new courses in ethnic studies, and we will write a framework for ethnic studies that is specific to San Diego Unified School District. We will do this in collaboration with our Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee members. As an anti-racist and restorative system, we must regularly review policies and practices to identify patterns of disproportionality and then take steps to address it. The last two items on taking action fall into this category. The first is our math placement policy, and the second are our AP practices. For the math placement policy for the 2021 school year, we will ensure consistency across the district on the implementation of the parent choice option for mathematics placement for students enrolling in schools that have more than one math pathway option. Secondly, to ensure access to rigorous and advanced placement courses, we will have our schools continue their efforts to enroll underrepresented students in AP courses, and we will provide opportunities for students to take AP courses that are not offered at their school site. In order to continue and accelerate our work in ethnic studies, we are requesting the board approve two allocations for funding. The first is an allocation for 3 resource teachers who will lead curriculum writing for additional ethnic studies courses and will organize and lead ongoing professional development. Second, an allocation to fund the following items: curriculum writing time for district classroom teachers to develop additional courses and units to be used TK-12 in our system. Funding for books and materials for ethnic studies courses and units. And finally, release time for 3 lead ethnic studies teachers who can provide ongoing support to other classroom teachers in a peer-to-peer fashion as the teachers take on new content and practices in ethnic studies. Thank you for your attention, and I will now turn it over to my colleague Tabga Bustani and her student co-presenter, Kate Papin.
Thank you, Wendy and Maya. Good afternoon. My name is Tabga Bustani, and I have the distinct honor of co-presenting with Kate Papin, senior at Mount Everest Academy, around our third approach, interrupting discriminatory grading practices. As an anti-racist and socially just education system, we must look critically at all of our policies and practices and identify those that result in disproportionality for our students of color. Grading policies and practices is one of the areas that requires our immediate attention and action in order to interrupt discriminatory practices. This slide shows the percentage of DF grades received in first semester by students in grades 6 to 12. For comparison, the graph shows 2 years of grade data, first trimester in 2018-19 and 2019-2020. We did not include second semester DF data because of the 2019-20 grade data was impacted by COVID-19 grading policy changes and therefore could not provide an equivalent comparison to the previous school year. This data is broken down into student groups and clearly shows that our students of color receive a disproportionate number of DF grades when compared to their white peers and the percentage of DFs earned overall in the district. For example, of all the grades earned by our Black students in grades 6 to 12, approximately 20% of those grades are Ds and Fs. Comparatively, of all the grades earned by our white students in grades 6 to 12, approximately 7% of those grades are Ds and Fs. This data has remained fairly consistent over time with only minor fluctuations. In order to change this outcome for our students of color, we need to interrupt the discriminatory practices that perpetuate these results. I am now going to turn it over to Kate Papin, my student co-presenter, who will share with you why interrupting inequitable grading practices matter.
Thank you. As children growing up, we're taught that grades are metrics not just for the knowledge that we've learned, but also for success and even our value. And this is dangerous in and of itself, but it becomes even more detrimental when considering the unfair and unequal grading system. And I want to acknowledge that in a lot of ways, I benefit from this grading system because I'm neurotypical. It tests the skills that are my strengths and because I look white. And so for the unequal grading system, this I see most strongly in the subjective grades, the way we test, and the time-intensive assignments that we are assigned in school. So in terms of subjective grades, we've seen that Black and Brown students in our district are already disproportionately disciplined, and this continues, from what I've seen, into the citizenship grades that we experience in class. And in terms of testing, tests make up a large component of our grades, but tests mainly for specific skills, not even knowledge that we've learned, just the ability to remember things and write them down. And our tests are largely one and done, and this doesn't allow us to learn from our mistakes and grow. Lastly, tests also help to continue this imbalance in power between teachers and students, and also doesn't allow students to advocate for themselves and to call out the bias within our test questions. So I was fortunate to have a teacher who allowed the entire class to discuss tests after they were taken. And in this way, we as a classroom could discuss and learn from our mistakes, but also recognize questions that were poorly written, and our teacher actually listened to us. And this also helped to create a better relationship between the students and the teacher. And lastly, for time-intensive assignments, these are assignments such as notes and drilling homework assignments, which can be helpful in the right context and for students with the right learning styles, but it's not necessarily helpful for all of our students. And we need to recognize that assignments such as these recognize students for having time to spend, which isn't fair, and benefit students who live closer to school and don't have to spend their time working or caring for their siblings. And I believe that by changing these things, it will help to further the relationship between teachers and students and reduce the power dynamic and allow for students and teachers to have discussions. And this will translate into discussions and comfort outside of just grading, but into the other issues being discussed here today. And lastly, as we implement these changes, I hope that you make this equitable, the access equitable for all students, and not just students whose parents have the time and privilege to come in to school and advocate for them. And I believe that by implementing these changes, it will help all students to learn perseverance and grit and to establish a growth mindset. And this will help us wherever we go in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, for your impactful words. We value your perspective and honor your voice. Our stakeholder groups offered ideas and suggestions for shifting grading practices that included allowing corrections and redoing work, promoting mastery of learning, engaging students in projects that require they demonstrate mastery to real audiences, asking students and parents, what is it that we can do to make ourselves better? Communicating across all stakeholder groups so that they understand the purpose and the role of grades and assessments. Additionally, our stakeholder groups offered ideas and suggestions for changing our grading policies, including creating protocol for F grades and reconsidering Fs to a not yet mark to incorporate a growth mindset, revising policies step by step and consider each change along the way, reviewing assessments to determine their worth through a culturally diverse lens, providing consistent district-wide expectations across grades and content areas, and finally, implementing a standards-based grading model for all levels that is consistent with all learning models. This is not the first time our board and our students have examined grades and grading practices. In January 2019, we engaged in a grading workshop with the board and our students. However, our actions at that time did not yield the results we wanted. Therefore, it is our collective responsibility to revisit this policy and its associated practices and to work with our teachers and leaders to bring about the changes that are needed for all of our students. We must work together to make standards-based grading a reality in our system. And as suggested by our think tank groups, take it a step at a time and monitor the impact of the changes as we go. One of our first steps along this journey is to engage our stakeholder groups and revise the current grading policy to state that our TK-12 grading policy will be standards-based and consider suggestions from the think tanks on changing how Fs are given and the possibility of a not yet option to provide opportunities for students to demonstrate mastery in other ways or in redo options. Second, we will revise our current grading policy to create a clear separation of non-academic factors from academic grades so that the student grades are not impacted by non-academic factors, as Kate mentioned. Those factors need to be reflected only in the citizenship marks. Finally, we propose the creation of site equity teams who will regularly review student data and engage in dialogue and continuous monitoring of student grades, as well as the implementation of the revised grading policy and practices. I will now turn this over to Area Superintendent Bruce Bivens and student co-presenter Jasmine Taylor, who will discuss with you our presentation on student discipline. Thank you.
Thank you, Tafka. And for the next 10 slides, myself and Jasmine, we're going to walk you through a new vision for discipline. Our district's disproportionate discipline data based on race, the student's experience, Jasmine's experience under the current uniform discipline policy, and the feedback from our stakeholder think tanks, and prescribe next steps for us taking action for building our anti-racist and restorative community across our entire district. The way to dismantle discriminatory discipline policies and practice is to first re-envision something completely different. This isn't about tinkering around the edges. This is about implementing a whole new framework that is truly driven by a new belief system and a new value system and supported in practice through policy. An anti-racist policy and a humanizing policy that we are naming as a restorative discipline policy. You see, racial prejudice and racial practices are formed around unfounded beliefs and irrational fears. And these types of beliefs and fears are supported by institutional power structures. Our goal is to eliminate the racial discipline gap and move in a direction that is 180 degrees away from any signs of normalized, punitive, and shaming responses to student behavior. The old ways must go. At its core, our restorative discipline policy is an anti-racist, humanizing policy to support us in becoming more of a restorative community, where every classroom, every school, in every central office space is restoring our community through daily decisions and daily interactions with our young people. We aspire our restorative community to promote values and principles that use inclusive and collaborative approaches for being in community together. These approaches validate the experiences and needs of everyone within the community, particularly those that have been marginalized, oppressed, or harmed. These approaches will allow us to act in ways that are healing rather than harmful and alienating. More simply stated, we must shift our policies from harm to restoring harmony, from power structures that reinforce hierarchical relationships to communities centered around humanity, and from racial discipline data of gross disproportionality to systems of direct and intentional supports for each and every student we serve. It is important to note that behavior is just a form of communication, and it is our duty to seek to understand what the behavior is communicating and what the child needs in that moment for support. Now let's take a look at the data and see what I see, and see if you see what I see. In order to truly disrupt the school to prison pipeline, each one of us must become critically self-aware by examining how our own personal actions each day either contribute to or are complicit in reinforcing bias and racism within our system. Discipline has always been associated with punishment. This data here is from 2018-19 school year and is disturbingly predictable and similar to our grading patterns and trends. The disproportionate outcomes for our students, particularly for our Black and Latinx students, is shockingly consistent over time. When we look at this data, we see our student enrollments across the top and discipline percentages of suspension and expulsion for Black, white, and Latinx students down the side. First, it is important to note that our Black students are almost 1/3 the size of enrollment compared to our white students in San Diego Unified. But our Black students have more suspensions and expulsions in our system comparatively. This means that our Black students being served in our schools with their white student classmates in the same classes are over 3 times more likely to be suspended and exponentially more likely to be expelled. And I'll explain that exponential feature soon. Our Latinx students represent a little under half of the district's enrollment, but over half of our district's disproportionate discipline data in both suspensions and expulsions. When the data is compared to their white classmates, our Latinx students are over 2 times more likely to be suspended, and they are exponentially more likely to be expelled. Now, this exponential difference in our expulsion data for our Black and Latinx students is due to the fact that when compared to our white student data, our white students are almost half as likely to be suspended and over 3 times less likely to be and receive an expulsion. We must address this harm. We must begin to build trust. We must begin to build a shared sense of humanity. And we must start the healing with the building of our anti-racist and restorative communities across our district. Now let's take a look at what our stakeholders think. As we are conducting our stakeholder think tanks, there was a consistent thread that referenced a need for incorporating restorative practices into our interactions with our young people. And the quote, "Defiance and respect are ambiguous terms that are not culturally responsive," is a call to action for us to take action against this historically rooted practices that punish students based on power struggles, compliance, ambiguity in language, and interpretation of policy. You see, we have a myriad of cultural backgrounds, experiences, and language in every one of our classrooms across our district. And respect can mean different things for different people from different backgrounds and cultures. What this means is that when a student is being referred out of class for defiance or disrespect, that this defiance is in opposition of an expectation, or disrespect is a result of a power struggle and imbalance in the community. I see that oftentimes we adults need to put the mirror up first and reflect on our language choice and ask ourselves, is our language culturally sensitive? Could our language choice or tone or disposition or body position Could those have triggered a response for a student to not comply and resist? It is here at the root where the power dynamic and struggle begins, where relationships are distrusted and ultimately where referrals are written for out of class or out of school suspensions. Our students said in our think tanks that they need us to follow a process that believes in them, supports their well-being, and reinforces a sense of community for them. Our students resoundingly expressed that they want opportunities to learn from their mistakes. They said they want our school staff to learn to be more aware of their actions and their language and how their actions can trigger student behaviors. And they are also calling on just to be more reflective, have more reflective conversations alongside them and with them and as a caring adult so that we can understand their needs. Our adults said that they want to see more restorative practices incorporated into the daily experiences of learning for our young people. Our adults said that they want guidance in creating anti-racist site discipline plans and better support students. They want to see an alignment between classroom expectations, a school vision, and a discipline policy so that all three reinforce a sense of community and belonging. They said they want their students to feel that they are trusted and have trusted adults that they can count on. One other area that is associated with student discipline and discipline policies that came up frequently in the discussions with students and adults was the need for each school site to inspect their dress code policies for bias and for discrimination, particularly when you look through the lenses of race, gender, and cultural heritage. Now I'm going to be handing this over to our Madison High School class of 2021 student, Jasmine Taylor, who will articulate through her lived experiences and those experiences of her peers why we must dismantle discriminatory practices and why we must change our policies that have been historically rooted in punishment. Jasmine.
Hello again, it's Jasmine, and here I am presenting on student discipline. Student discipline usually comes from different perspectives of respect. Teachers and students must create a relationship before issuing out referrals. Us as students come into school looking for a community of peers that reflect our values, and we then create friends. This not only pertains to students, but as well as teachers. When a teacher reflects our values into the classroom like respect, us as students often use the phrase, if we are respected, we will respect you. When we enter a classroom and a teacher gives out a referral to the student that isn't respecting them, the student feels just the same as a teacher, not respected. From then on, the student-teacher community is broken. The student will continue to receive referrals because they feel that they are not respected. In reality, there is a more prominent undertone in this narrative. Without a community, the student feels as though the teacher is giving off a perception of them not being there. Then the student does not feel like they are met with a trusting environment, leading to a disconnect from the student community. In order for the student to feel as though they have a community, we must create a relationship of trust and understand the students' values and how they pertain to the teachers. With understanding each other's values, a relationship of trust can be created rather than the constant use of referrals. As a student, we understand that teachers are writing referrals as a way to show the student that they are doing something wrong. But teachers must understand that referrals do the exact opposite of what they intend on doing. Rather than showing them the need to change their behavior, it shows the student the need to continue to not respect them. Before this occurs, we must create a supportive community that starts with students and teachers changing their perceptions of respect. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you, Jasmine. Thank you for your powerful words. Thank you for painting a picture that articulates for us how we need to do and get better. We deeply appreciate you, your courage to stand up for what is right, and your commitment to us to help us make a change. It's important to note that our restorative justice work formally began as a district with the opening of our restorative justice department. It is also important to note that our existing LCAP goals call out the need to embed restorative justice practices in the following ways. In goal number 1, there's language around reducing suspensions and expulsions and expanding the implementation of restorative justice practices. In goal number 4, there's language around using restorative justice practices for both prevention and intervention, such as restorative circles for building community and restorative conferencing for repairing harm. In goal number 4, there's a call out to explicitly teach restorative practices, integrate those practices into existing models of multi-tiered systems of support, and use restorative practices to build a positive school climate and culture for the students we serve. And lastly, in goal number 5, there is language around using restorative justice practices to support our family and community engagement in meaningful ways. To truly get at the structures that reinforce disproportionate outcomes and criminalize student behaviors, we must go where the systems of identification, stereotype threat, and low expectations begin, and we must take action. We're going to take action in the following ways. First, the pre-referral process, bullet number 1. Every school must track and monitor the pre-referral data that will support our students, know their needs, instill restorative approaches, and ultimately build community with our students. What they feel, when they feel seen, heard, and cared for, they feel part of a community. We must first focus on supports before we push students out, which leads us to the second bullet, referral level. Every school will monitor every referral, create systems at the site level to get at the following questions. Was the referral based on ambiguity in language and expectations like we described around defiance and respect? Were restorative approaches implemented prior to any referral written? Was the student given opportunities to learn from their behaviors? Was there bias due to race or gender? Were there actions taken that were culturally insensitive? And is there a pattern forming in that classroom community? In the classroom community, sites need to inspect for the following. Do our classrooms implement restorative circles as a means to build community and to understand each student's cultural heritage? Do our classrooms allow for restorative conferencing when harm has occurred? Do our classrooms implement self-regulation strategies like deep breathing, personal journaling, self-regulation strategies like taking a personal break, speaking with a trusted adult, seeking peer support? Do our classrooms explicitly teach into social emotional learning? Do our classrooms teach mindfulness strategies and reflective techniques? Do they have a place in the classroom for self-regulation and de-escalation? Do they have a student self-referral system to ask for support? This referral level is so critical in the school to prison pipeline. We must disrupt the past practices and dismantle the past structures that support students being referred out for behavior and shift to structures to referring in for support. Third, at the suspension level, our school sites have the same responsibilities that we are calling out at the referral level. Just like when we want students to remain in class, we also want our students to remain in school. Our schools will track and monitor suspension data routinely and use existing resources, staff, and spaces on campus to implement alternative and restorative responses to previously administered out-of-school suspension. For example, we are affording our students with staff mentors, peer mediations. Are we doing daily check-ins and daily checkouts? Restorative conferencing, is that a mainstay? And in school suspension rooms, are they available? Are we training for restorative techniques and allowing students to learn from their mistakes? So our students can become more critically self-aware, mindful, and reflective of their own actions. Now let's take a look at that next level of pipeline. The big shift here is, as we are building our anti-racist restorative communities, is to have our schools develop and refine their behavior support plans and have them rooted in restorative strategies so alternatives to expulsions can be implemented. For example, alternatives can include restorative conferencing, outside counseling, targeted services, parent partnerships, and alternative educational placements considered by all parties, including the student and family having voice in that process. Our students must be given restorative opportunities to learn self-reflection, make better choices, and stay connected in their community. We must do whatever it takes and truly never give up on them. Our next action is to ensure every student on every campus has a champion. Our student champions are the trusted adults that students can depend on to make our restorative processes follow. Our parents are intimately involved. Our champions will be trained to know how to best support every step of a process that values our students as vital members of our community and provides alternatives to referrals, alternatives to suspensions, and alternatives to expulsions. This can only truly interrupt and disrupt the prison pipeline if we implement this right. And if a student is expelled, we pledge that every panel member will complete mandatory anti-bias and anti-racist training as a requirement to participate in the expulsion hearing process. We are committed to engage our stakeholders in deep discussions regarding these shifts for leading, supporting, and implementing a restorative discipline policy on every campus within our district. These discussions will continue this summer with our stakeholders and our staff members to prepare us for board approval and action of a new restorative discipline policy during this September's board meeting. Now, our schools will support each student's physical, social, and emotional well-being to prevent out-of-class referrals, implement alternatives to out-of-school suspensions, and interrupt the use of expulsions. Our integrated support teams will ensure we are pushing in supports first through coordinated and integrated approaches before any push-out action is ever considered. And our site equity teams will ensure we are monitoring the data for fairness and disproportionality, that all restorative approaches are considered and implemented, and that the data impacts on our school sites are moving us toward eliminating the disproportionality gaps, reducing overall referrals, suspensions, and expulsions, and that the climate on a campus is spiraling up, where every student feels valued, heard, seen, supported, that they know that we stand up and stand for them in an anti-racist, restorative community that is being lived, and we're living into those values in every classroom, on every campus. These teams can be comprised of current teams on campuses and must include student voice. Our students' lived experiences will guide us and guide every school to building these anti-racist and restorative communities on their campuses. Now I would like to turn this over to Dr. Noemi Villegas to dive deeper into the interruption of the school to prison pipeline.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it. My name is Noemi Villegas. I am the Instructional Support Officer for the Division of Integrated Youth Services. In this slide, we will discuss our approach to interrupting policies that perpetuate the school to prison pipeline. Our students have the right to fully participate in an educational process that values their individuality, listens deeply to their aspiration, removes barriers for academic access, and interrupts practices that are discriminatory, racist, and unjust. It is our district's commitment to cultivating classrooms and schools are places of hope, where educators and students can co-create the school communities where everybody can thrive, and where policies are intentionally designed to disrupt inequities and criminalization of student behavior. We believe that the school to prison pipeline can be interrupted and dismantled by design through a constant evaluation of school practices, ongoing monitoring of student data, continuous attention to student-teacher relationships, and ongoing revision of disciplinary practices that interrupt the detrimental trajectory that we see in the school discipline and law enforcement. Our schools, we do see right now powerful examples of restorative justice practices. However, we acknowledge that the implementation of these practices continues to be voluntary, and voluntary participation is no longer enough. We affirm the school to prison pipeline, our commitment to the school to prison pipeline by implementing the following 3 actions. Number 1, beginning this August, we will begin to provide comprehensive training on anti-bias and culturally responsive training for all educators. These trainings will highlight concrete strategies and practices educators will do to increase meaningful connections with students, practices that are culturally relevant, be responsive to the students' needs, and understand the lived realities of our students. Second, we will ensure that schools interrupt disproportionalities in student discipline by leveraging restorative justice practices and embedding these practices into site-based discipline policies. Our third approach will be to affirm our belief that student disciplinary processes are led by our principals rather than school police. School police involvement should be limited to only be requested in situations that cannot safely and appropriately be handled by school staff. As we disrupt the school to prison pipeline, we must continue to create coherent, strategic intent, and clear outcomes. The efforts mentioned above will be implemented with consistency and fidelity throughout our schools. Interrupting the school to prison pipeline is critical to our district's mission. I will now turn the conversation over to Dr. Ottinger, who will speak in more detail about the alignment of school police to our restorative values.
Thank you, Dr. Villegas. Good afternoon. My name is Greg Ottinger, and I'm the Chief Business Officer for the district. To begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly clarify that we employ our own police district department, who are part of our overall student support team. This also means that we do not have a specific contract with the San Diego Police Department for the use of their officers. This choice to have our own in-house department affords us the opportunity to ensure that we retain the ability to shape and refine the focus of our work under leadership of our police chief, our superintendent, and our Board of Education. Our students deserve to receive an education in school environments that are just, inclusive, supportive, and safe. We need to ensure our students are physically, academically, and socio-emotionally safe in our schools. And it takes powerful team dynamics to ensure that our students are supported throughout their entire educational journey. We must continue to work together to create systems that support our students and continue to highlight the alignment of restorative practices throughout this work. It is through these powerful collaborations that we, as a district, strive to provide student supports that minimize all barriers to academic achievement. Every educator in San Diego has the absolute responsibility of understanding and leveraging students' strengths and brilliance in a culturally responsive and sustaining manner. This includes our school police. As part of the overall district's approach, school police has continued to refine their own practices and has participated in the anti-bias, anti-racism, and restorative practices training. However, we know there's more that we can do to ensure that we support each and every child. When we look at our data and practices, we see that the arrest rates grew from 154 arrests in the 17-18 school year to 208 arrests in 18-19. We know that collectively we can take actions that help shape a system that decreases any need to arrest students and increases our restorative stance. Moving forward, for the 2021 school year, we will take specific actions that realign and reimagine the work and approaches entrusted to the members of our school police team. This includes the formation of a student and staff, including school police, committee to take a deep dive into the what and the how school police work. This committee will work together and bring recommended actions to this Board of Education that detail the actions we can take around a reimagined school police approach, including the review of a new school police response matrix and approaches with uniforms based on what support is needed. We look forward to convening this committee in August. In response to feelings expressed by students, we will be asking this Reimagining School Police Committee to work on reforms that address the experience that students have been expressing regarding feeling criminalized on the campus. And we must address this when we reopen in order to ensure and encourage the positive relationship and support that can and will be provided by our school police. We also know that we have the opportunity to act now. And as an initial shift, we are taking a very close look at our policies, and we are expecting to implement a new de-escalation policy along with training to our officers by the end of August. We're also updating our approaches to the use of force. Our revised use of force policy will ban the use of a carotid hold, include language on the duty to intervene, track any hands-on contact incidents involving a student and officers, and ensure that any incidents involving school police and the use of force will now go through a formal review process, including being personally reviewed by the district's chief of police. Together, we will evolve to better support our students based on what they need and in the way that they need it. At this point, I'm going to pass the next portion of the presentation back to Dr. Villegas.
Thank you, Greg. Willful defiance is defined as disrupting school activities and otherwise willfully defying the valid authority of school staff. This broad definition continues to perpetuate disproportionalities in our student suspensions, specifically affecting our students of color. Ultimately, willful defiance suspensions prevent our students from having valuable instructional time that is necessary for their current and their future academic success. We have heard from our students the ambiguity of the definition of defiance. This term is subjective and could be interpreted in a variety of ways, from failing to follow directions, chewing gum, using a cell phone, or wearing a hat in class. In addition, 2 decades of research show that suspensions do not work. When students are suspended for any reason, specifically for willful defiance, they return to school less connected and put their behind academically. Sending students away from school prevents us and takes away the opportunity for engaging with our students in a restorative process that can help them understand, reflect, and take responsibility for their actions in their communities. Research also shows us that one suspension doubles a student's likelihood to drop out of school and triples the student's likelihood to enter the juvenile system. These statistics, as we have mentioned today, are particularly impacting for our students of color, our Black and our brown kids, who are disproportionately suspended. As Bruce explained, we have seen a decrease in overall student expulsions from the 17-18 to the 18-19 year. However, these numbers are not enough. We must continue to take action to minimize the number of students being suspended by taking concrete steps to interrupt the suspensions based on ambiguity that willful defiance implies. Therefore, here today with you, we affirm our commitment to expand our existing pre-K-5 prohibition on suspensions for willful defiance to middle schools. And we also affirm our commitment to continue to convene immediate stakeholder engagement to finalize the revisions to our existing uniform discipline policy in order to expand the ban on willful defiance to all secondary schools. This change is consistent with our efforts to foster restorative communities in our schools, moving us closer to continue to provide student supports and alternative to suspension programs that ensure student success in their education and also build safe and supportive schools for all. As we continue to cultivate anti-racism and restorative communities in our school district, we must also take a pause to understand the lived experiences of our students. Today with us, we have brilliant minds and brilliant students that will help us strengthen our collective approach toward building and sustaining practices that are socially just. Therefore, by listening to our students, we have a powerful opportunity to disrupt policies and practices that continue to marginalize young people in our schools. As you listen to their voices, we want to highlight the importance of reflection, relationships, and responsibility. Dr. Paulo Freire, philosopher in education, describes dialogue as a practice of freedom, a process in which educators and learners can grow in humility, trust, critical thinking, and hope. Today, we are joined by our young scholars. They will be sharing their brilliance and wisdom through our student dialogue. I would like to introduce our panel facilitator, Precious, our program manager for youth advocacy, Ebony Weathers, and our program manager for restorative justice practices, Dr. Michelle Ferrer.
Hello, my name is Precious Letchaw, and I just wanted to speak a little bit to why I'm here today. Restorative justice practices is what brought me here, and it has empowered me since my freshman year to make a change in my community. And so I'm really glad to be here and be here with my peers, and I really just want to hand it off to them. But yeah, I'm just really excited to have this space and get a chance for our peers to share their lived experiences, share their possibilities and their solutions. I'm not sure if our co-facilitators, Michelle sorry, I'm really bad with last names, and Michelle and Ebony, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Precious. My name is Ebony Weathers. I am the program manager for the Youth Advocacy Department, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Today, Michelle and I are going to step back and really give space to the students. Their voices are powerful. I just want to personally say how impressed I've been. I've been sitting here kind of just listening and taking everything in. I have so much gratitude and pride in the work that you all are doing. You've met with us, outside of us, and really built some power today behind your words. So thank you for allowing us to be part of this. We're going to ask that as we go through the areas that we've brought up today, students who are speaking limit themselves to about a minute or so that everybody has a chance to speak or ask a question. And Dr. Ferrer, if you would like to say a few words before we get started.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Ferrer. And so first and foremost, I want to lift up the authenticity and the shared responsibility that our young scholars are bringing to this conversation. While we are designated as co-facilitators, you will definitely see Ebony and I model what it means to really allow young folks to step into their power and share their wisdom and expertise. And so I'm going to invite all the adults and everyone in virtual space to really listen deeply to what our scholars are saying. They have worked tremendously hard and with fierce commitment to really own this space and share their truth. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to pass the mic back to Precious.
So yes, we went over just our two guidelines is the step up, step back. And that would be like limiting ourselves to that 1 minute but speaking our truths and really just getting across our message. And our second guideline would be the listening deeply. So as we're listening to our peers, to listen to understand. And so I will get into our first question. And our first question is, how does representation or diversity in staff matter?
Okay, so hey guys, my name is Naido Taimangarkoth. I am an alumni from Morris High School, and I currently attend UCSD. And I'd first like to thank you to Michelle Ferrer, Precious, Maya, Ebony, and so on and so forth, the youth advocators, for allowing me to have this space. But so I kind of just want to make an introduction. I just wanted to give myself an introduction. I do have a group that will be speaking on the staff diversity portion. So if Noah, who goes by they, them, theirs, actually, I go by she, her, I forgot to mention that. But if Noah would like to speak up on this topic first, go ahead. You now have the mic.
Hello.
Hey, Noah, I think you're having technical difficulties. If your screen is on, maybe try without video and just...
Noah, can you maybe try calling in? And Naidut, if you want to move maybe to the next person while Noah tries to call in so we can at least get the audio portion.
Definitely. So the next person that was actually going on this process would be Aaron. So Aaron, if you want to just go ahead and uplift the stats that you were doing your own research on and kind of just speak to why staff diversity is important, now is your time.
Thank you, Nyadiev. My name is Aaron Williams Alexandrovich Chishuk. I'll be a senior. And I'd like to draw your attention to a study that was done by Harvard and MIT just this last year in 2019. And the study showed that essentially teachers, 10th grade teachers specifically, with students, and that they showed particular high standards for their students, that those students had much higher college graduation rates, effectively showing that teachers with high expectations really does matter. What the study also showed was that white teachers showed significantly less high expectations, or lower rather expectations, for Black students and students of color. Way I see it, there are two solutions for this. One is to educate our teachers, try to help them understand that it really is important to have equally high expectations for all their students to help them succeed. The second one, of course, is to hire more teachers of color, teachers who will show that their students all have equally high potential and that they deserve to receive the same levels of education. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for that, Aaron. So the next person within our group was actually Hillary, since I'm not sure if Noah was able to get back on.
I'm back.
Okay, perfect. Your audio sounds great now. So if you'd like to share your bit, now you have the mic, Beyonce. Noah, you could go now if you'd like. That's fine.
I see that she connected.
She what? I'm so sorry, I didn't hear.
She just disconnected.
Oh, okay.
And do you think it would be okay if we move on to Hillary and come back to her?
Yeah, definitely. So Hillary, if you'd like to talk about the proposals and so on and so forth, you have the floor.
My name is Hillary Nguyen, and I'm going to be a junior this upcoming school year at Sarah High School. And my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And when some of my peers and I were talking earlier, Aaron mentioned this program that I want to bring to light called the APS Physics Bridge Program. And I'm just going to go off the website, but this bridge program, it aims to improve access to and culture of graduate education for all students, with emphasis on those underrepresented in doctoral programs in physics. And this program, it helps to it reaches out to undergrad students of color based, like an extra boost in order to help them get through school. Took some of the things that this program offers and we offered it to teachers, BIPOC teachers, the teaching field, and feel less alienated and will feel more included in school. So yeah, by doing this, we can take the step to reach our goal of anti-racism in schools and yeah, just to basically help students feel more comfortable. Thank you. If no one wants to go, then they can go too.
Thank you so much for that, Hillary. I really appreciate that. And I'm not sure if Noah got back on the call, if you want to give it one more shot.
Okay, one more shot.
Perfect.
Okay. Hello, my name is Noah Austin. I'm going to be a freshman at Lincoln. And to start off my talk, I've been from school to school, and all of them had something in common. The staff was predominantly white, and I could barely recall having 1 to 2 staff of color. If I had just one teacher of color while I was younger, I might have been more comfortable in my skin and might have felt at ease being myself. But one day, I moved to Imperial, near Lincoln, and I was very grateful for it because I got to go to Knox. I met a teacher of color who I could let my walls down with. A teacher I could voice what was happening to the kids of color. How some of the teachers, Caucasian if I may add, refused to teach us because we were too difficult and are hard-headed. But this teacher, he taught the hard-headed kids, quote unquote, to appreciate their skin, their culture, and their heritage. And some of those difficult kids, quote unquote, came up to be ASB president. They were in AVID, a college setup course, and they got mostly all A's. I was one of those difficult kids, but look at me now. I'm sitting at a board meeting changing the world as we know it for the San Diego Unified District. Having more staff of color gives students a more understanding person who will listen to them and give them people who they can relate with. I want to know how they came to be and what led them to becoming a teacher. Along those lines, I know it's in the board members' best part for all students to have an equal chance of succeeding. Schools must involve their communities. One approach is to broadening recruitment effort in hiring community members to increase the diversity of the educator workforce. In doing so, schools and districts can develop relationships with diverser communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noah. I really appreciate that. And since I'm the last person in this group, or if anybody else wants to speak onto it, they totally can after me. But to kind of just to speak more on the issue of the lack of staff diversity, obviously I am a graduate. Noah, okay, thank you. I am a graduate from San Diego Unified, and so just throughout all of my 13 years of schooling in the San Diego Unified School District, I've dealt with many racial issues, many that are similar to Noah's, of many teachers saying that students that are my skin color or those alike are not able to achieve high-ranking positions and so on and so forth. And so to basically speak more specifically on an issue, back in elementary school, I was in the ELA program for 4 out of 5 years. I'm Southern Sudanese, but I was born in the United States. And despite the fact that my mother, who did have a huge language barrier with the school, had told them multiple times that I was a student who was fluent in English, they kept me in the program while I was simultaneously within the GATE seminar program, which basically made no sense. If I knew English so well in the GATE seminar program, how is it that I was in ELA for 4 out of my 5 years of elementary school? If I had a diverse staff in the elementary school I went to was predominantly white. If I had a diverse staff, that never would have happened, because they would have understood my story, they would have understood my background, my history, and so on and so forth. And so just to basically push forward into high school, I did not feel comfortable within many of my classes as well, which many of those being APs and honors. And if I had other Black students within the class and Black educators, I would have felt more comfortable in the spaces that I was in. And so paired with everything that was said by my counterparts, Aaron, Hillary, and Noah, thank you so much for speaking. I would just like to say that I urge you to follow the demands in the staff diversity slides. And not only that, I urge all of the people who are eligible to vote up in November will vote to repeal Prop 209 by voting yes on ACA 5, which will get more BIPOC educators within our schools, and will but not only that, I urge all of you guys within the district to look around in this chat, look around at who is in this area, in this space. From what I see, it's a huge white populace that is here. And I'm not saying that is a horrible problem, but I'm just saying that if we really would like to see a change within our school systems and and if we really want to see a change for our students and see that the students are being properly represented within the school system by their teachers, I would also say that for the staff on the board as well, get a more diverse staff here. Not only do students want to see more diversity within our schools, we want to see diversity within our board. Looking up, we would like to see everybody collectively working towards a common goal of seeing more BIPOC bodies in positions of power, so that us as students can have more just more energy and just more faith in ourselves to be able to get into these positions. So that's what I have to say. Precious, I pass it back to you. Thank you.
So there was a couple people after you that wanted to speak. I think it was Daniel and Stephanie. I'm curious if both of you have anything that you would like to share before we move on to the next question.
Hi, I actually wanted to speak a little bit about possible proposals to the current lack of diversity regarding instructors in the district. We have obviously heard of the importance of diversity, and especially with Black and Brown kids, the presence of those voices in institutions. This can be helped with a blind hiring process. While the current hiring process relies on references and questions, you still have to provide your name, which can contribute to unconscious biases, especially with uncommon and blatantly non-white names. The interview board requirements, if I remember correctly, also state that there should be a diverse hiring team, but those should be more highly enforced. The interviews should also be considered in being anonymous. While face-to-face interaction is inevitable, it should be kept as anonymous as possible. Obviously, this would also come with moving precognitions, like assigning certain races to certain majors, and not being biased towards high income zip codes and low income zip codes. I also forgot to introduce myself, so I'm Stephanie Lee. I'm a senior at Maps Academy, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. Thank you.
So we're getting a message. We are like past the time of this board workshop, but I would love to pass it to Michelle really quickly to give us an update on how we will continue our questioning.
Okay, so thank you for that, Precious. So board, thank you so much for being sitting with respect and listening, right? It's been a minute since we heard your voice, so we want to hit pause, and actually I'm going to adjust a little bit with our leaders and scholars. So we're going to do a question, and then we're going to allow space for the board and invite them to make comments or ask questions. Is that all right, Precious? Can you give me a thumbs up?
So can you elaborate just a little bit?
Sure. So right now we're done with question 1, I believe, right?
Yes.
We're going to hit pause, and we're going to open it up for the board to respond, right? When they're done, then we'll move on to the next question. How does that sound?
Or, Daniel wanted to speak on this. I just wanted to make sure that Daniel had an opportunity to speak before we did that section with the agreement.
Yes.
Precious and Michelle.
Yes, Daniel.
Excuse me just for a second. Can everybody hear me? Okay, I just wanted to say that probably the best format at this point would be for you to continue on with your presentation on the different questions, because at the end, we have to come back to all 4 or 5 areas anyway, and we will discuss them. And at that point, if we have questions for the students, scholars, and others, we can do that at that point. But I want to allow you to just kind of continue, with your presentation, so not break it up. We could really throw you off by 5 hours if we start interrupting your presentation right now. So thank you.
Thank you so much. To you, Precious, or to Daniel.
All right, Daniel, you said it's okay to skip you, but there is some time now. So if you would like to go, now is a great time. And if not, we can move forward.
Okay. So I have a personal story. Hi, I'm Daniel Tran. My pronouns are he, him, his. And during my freshman year at Sarah High School, we had a teacher on campus who was a person of color, and it was her first year teaching. So this pulls back to the idea of like teacher seniority. They stay longer than other teachers. And she was in my opinion, one of the best teachers I could have had for English. So for me, I struggle with English a lot. I'm a slow reader. I can't really write essays very well. And she understood this. So because we had a quite loud class, I asked her if I could step outside to read. And that was like the best thing for me. And I really think that teachers in the first year is always the hardest, but also different teachers of color also get to be moved around, and being moved around doesn't give those teachers a sense of community within a school specifically. And if we allow those teachers to stay and build their own community, maybe we can see more teachers or people of color within our schools, within our school districts, and within specific schools that may or may not need them. Because at my school, we are predominantly white teachers. However, I think seeing other teachers of color or ethnicities, that'd be great in me connecting with them specifically, because I don't see many people of my ethnicity, which is Asian. I see maybe a handful. But knowing that there are people of color and different ethnicities at schools allows students to relate to them, and go to them for a reference of help if needed.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you everyone for sharing in this part. If there is any last things anybody has, if not, I will move on to the next question, which is, why does ethnic studies matter to all of us? And if it's okay for the first person that answers that question to introduce themselves.
Maya, I see you on here as first if you'd like to kick off group 2.
Hi, my name is Maya Castrena. I am speaking again on this topic, and I just wanted to clarify and further emphasize that if during ethnic studies, it allows us to, and it's providing a lens into different cultures, and it allows for those who aren't able and don't experience these certain situations and have different privileges within society, and it allows for greater understanding and let them know that they have opportunities that others may not. And it just allows for a more understanding environment in the school system. As I had a teacher this year, and she used texts entirely for Black authors for 6 weeks. And it allowed us to have these deep conversations and understand, because one student is white, they haven't had to go through the same things that another student in our class has had to. And it just allowed for a very welcoming and comforting environment that I felt safe in, and everyone that I've talked to and the whole class, we felt safe and welcome in, and felt like we could really achieve success. Thank you. And Emma, would you like to talk next?
Hi, I'm Emma Valenzuela. I'm going to be a junior at La Jolla High School. And so what I wanted to talk about is I go to a predominantly white school, and recently a video resurfaced of a student saying the N-word in a very aggressive manner. And while the aggression in their tone showed they knew what the word meant, I believe the word was supposed to be used for shock humor, as a bunch of kids in the video laughed. And there's a huge problem among students, white students in particular, who have the privilege to look at racism as a joke and as something that doesn't even exist in today's society because they haven't seen it. So for people to understand how to be anti-racist, they need to understand the history and how that has led us to today. So be it the loopholes of the 13th Amendment or the accomplishments of BIPOC, or how this land was not conquered, it was stolen. Students need to learn how to be empathetic and compassionate for all backgrounds, and to find everyone's differences beautiful, and not just hoping that we're all the same, yet like understanding each other's differences and thinking that's beautiful. So white students are not used to being left out in history books, and their perspectives are, so when their perspectives are not shown, they're quick to silence others, and with microaggressions like, why can't we all just get along? And I think we should get over slavery and stuff like that. So BIPOC perspectives really need to be taught. So this is, so those microaggressions don't really happen, and so we can have a more empathetic society. So that's what I have to say.
And Tiari, I believe you are next.
Yes, I am. Hi, my name is Tiari Jones. I'm an ongoing junior at Lincoln High School. And basically, I'm just going to be speaking on my perspective as far as ethnic studies. We were honored enough to be honored the course at our school. So I did take ethnic studies my freshman year, both the first and second semester. So from my perspective, ethnic studies was something that empowered us. It was very liberating, and it was very transformative. It's a growing change that has came into the district, and I believe it's something that all students should be honored to have and presented at their schools. I believe that it's an entire academic discipline that we're being cut from. Well, not me personally, but the rest of our district is being cut from. And yeah, I just think more than ever, we're very hungry for the knowledge of our ancestors with the Black Lives Movement going on and the police brutality and so forth and so on. And I believe that we are some very powerful youth, and we have a very powerful voice because we are the future, and we are going to speak to what we know. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you so much for sharing. I see Malachi. I think I might be saying his name wrong.
Hi, it's Miyako.
Oh, my apologies. I apologize.
Hi. Hello, my name is Miyako Robert. I will be a junior this upcoming semester at Mount Everest Academy. Ethnic studies matter because as the students of America's school system, we've been indoctrinated with the way society wants us to live and understand how society is. In history class, really it's his story because us students of different cultures, we're learning a majority of the history we're learning is the Caucasian successes and failures. And we are learning some different cultures as like the Mayan civilization and some African stories and history we may have learned. Sorry. I'm brief.
Deep breaths. Deep breaths.
Yes, thank you. A personal story of mine was mostly for English class is when I learned that High Tech High middle school students in 8th grade, they were reading The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. And I was amazed because I read the book myself and it was beautiful. And it was something that I felt that my school should read. So I asked my principal, can we have it implemented into our studies and something that should be discussed and so on. But I was politely declined because there was mild swearing in there. And I was shocked because I've read stories in my English class in 7th grade, 6th grade that had more things to say and more different stories that just didn't make sense. It was worse than the book The Hate You Give, and it was kind of hurtful, and we learned more of the Holocaust, but that's really it. It's just we're learning how Columbus found America, but it's not true when our ancestors said he was an invader. And I'm just going to end it like this. It's ethnic studies matter, especially in history, because students of different cultures should learn our past and not only the Caucasian race. We're all important in history. We should learn our history because we do not want to repeat the past. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Before we move on to our next question, is there any last things from anyone? Or anything that anyone would like to add? If not,
wait, can I? Sorry.
Oh, Temper, you can go first.
Oh, hi, Diana. Okay.
Hi.
Wait, did you want me to go first or? Okay, so I'm Temple. I'm a rising senior at Lincoln. And I just really quickly, athletic studies is so passionate. I'm so passionate about it. It's very close to my heart. So I had to say my little piece about it. I think that ethnic studies should not only be a freshman year history requirement, but should also be implemented throughout the entirety of K through 12 education, because it makes no sense that in 5th grade, they had me in a colonial fair with a bonnet on my head churning butter, and I didn't even know about the terrible things that happened to Native Americans in this country. It's not only laughable, but it's literally sickening. And although I do applaud our district's efforts to add more ethnic study courses for 9 through 12, I think it's even more important to have it as a foundation in 9th grade, because like myself and others, when you go into the advanced placement track, you're immediately switched into a Eurocentric perspective so quickly. I was fortunate enough to be able to take ethnic studies as a freshman, but as soon as I left that class, I was in European history, then US history, and then I'm going to take AP government. And that's all Eurocentric and whitewashed. So it's really important to have that foundation of your knowledge and your culture and your history before you get that perspective. I also believe that ethnic studies is important because our current history curriculum right now, you get slavery, and then 100 years later, you get Martin Luther King, and that's it. And I can testify to the fact that learning about slavery and Martin Luther King isn't enough, because in the class where my teacher literally called me a cockroach, told me my ancestors were loud, had all of my peers raise their hands if their family members had ever been racist, there's a big laminated poster of Martin Luther King on his cabinet. So obviously, excuse my frankness, but make it make sense. You know, the pieces don't match up. So I feel like also to tie it into the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of people, me myself included, our quick answer is educate yourself, educate yourself, educate yourself. But the education starts here. This is where the education starts. If you don't educate them in kindergarten, in second grade, in eighth grade, in high school, that's when you get the adults right now in our current society that are making these racist decisions. So in short, I am a huge advocate for ethnic studies, and I believe it is an important requirement for us to be better members of society and create a more caring and empathetic world. Thank you.
I think I agree with everything that was said. Everything was very powerful. To introduce myself, my name is Diana Frias. I'm a rising senior at Hoover High School, pronouns she, her, hers. And I just want, like Temple said, I wanted to add on to why I believe that ethnic studies is important. It was already mentioned that we typically hear about his story, which really is just about, excuse me for my frankness, which is just old white men. And we never hear our stories. And I think that is very damaging to the BIPOC community, because often we are misinterpreted in the textbooks, or we are representative in such a negative manner. And there's always more of a negative connotation to different races and ethnicities in these textbooks. So I have began to notice that people are beginning to believe these things about their own ethnicities and races. And I think that should come to an end. And by including ethnic studies as a requirement, it shall start the conversations and have just more engaged students from all backgrounds. So yeah, that's why I believe that ethnic studies are important. Thank you.
Thank you for your addition. That was really nice. I think we are going to move on to the third piece. I wanted to do a time check and see what's available to us still, and just a reminder to try to limit it to 1 minute, because we have about 3 other questions. Michelle or Ebony, time check, maybe, possibly, question mark?
We are over time, but I think many of the folks in the room are happy to stay here and continue to hear from the students who have prepared the statements and the questions and the feedback for us. So I will be here. Michelle or any of the board, if you would like to speak on the time left available for the students.
The time left is the time that the students want to speak. They're doing a tremendous job, and we want to continue hearing from them. And Precious is doing a great job of monitoring it better than we could do on the board. So just continue forward.
John, this is Stacy Monreal. I just want to make sure everyone feels comfortable moving forward and not worrying about time. So are you saying that we can go ahead and finish up this portion of listening to student voices and then have board student dialogue after that?
That's correct. Yeah, okay. Go ahead. We want them to give their full presentation, and then we'll synthesize it and do whatever we need to do in terms of the time at that point. But we don't want to cut off the students doing all of this.
All right. So we don't have to worry about time. We want to hear from the students, and we thank you so much. And then we'll get a great opportunity to have dialogue with the Board of Education as well.
So moving on to our next question, we have, why does interrupting and equitable grading practices matter? And I believe Isolina is our first speaker.
Hello, so my name is Iselina, and I'm going to be a senior at Lincoln High School this upcoming school year. And I just wanted to talk about this topic because having inequitable grading practices never benefit anybody. It frankly just discourages a lot of the students and it makes a lot of them feel inferior and like they can't do anything, which also leads to a lot of them dropping out or failing their classes to start with and then dropping out. And a lot of students, even maybe if they graduate, don't even feel like they're mentally or academically prepared to go to college, which is so sad because everybody should feel that they are able to do that and get a higher education. And I have a personal experience where I've worked on an assignment with one of my friends, and we had very similar answers on a worksheet, and we submitted it to our teacher, and we received drastically different grades. My friend received a lower grade, and it was so unfair because and I don't believe it was a racial issue, but I do believe it was because she doesn't always turn in her assignments and she doesn't always get the best grades. And so the teacher wasn't trying to give her a fair opportunity to improve her status, her academic status in her class. And I just think that that's so unfair, especially when a teacher's job is to support us all equally in our academics, especially. And it's just was super heartbreaking to see my friend feel so discouraged after that had happened. And no student should ever feel that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Iso. I think Alyssa is next.
Yeah. So my name is Alyssa Murray. I'm a junior at Sarah High School, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a high performer at school, but that doesn't mean I'm not able to recognize when students are unjustly assessed. And obviously, these practices are inequitable. They discourage student success, and they need to be changed immediately. But regardless of any specific proposal that's suggested, it's unlikely that teachers with bias will actually comply with these. My mom is a teacher in San Diego Unified, and she has told me before that she will go to trainings and then she'll try to implement whatever they tell her, but then in a few weeks she'll go back to whatever she was doing just because it's easier. So from this experience that I heard from her, what I've taken away from that is that if you try to teach teachers that already have racism rooted inside of them, they aren't going to change. So what I propose instead is hiring administrators specifically to investigate teachers with claims against them that students can come to report without feeling like they're going to face any repercussions from the individual teacher they're reporting. And the idea of that is just to make sure that, like our government, where there's checks and balances, students have a voice against their teachers when they see something being wrong, when they see people being discriminated against, so that moving forward, students continue to have a voice like they are right now. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
And so I see we have Eric next. Thank you for sharing.
Good afternoon to the board, to the district, to my fellow classmates, to everyone. It is an honor to speak. I've been sitting in my seat boiling, waiting to get this out. I think the proposals for equitable grades are fabulous because they pave way to shine a light for more equitable practices throughout schools. Because in the 4th grade, I learned about the the school to prison pipeline, right? I've seen school police. My bathrooms have always been disgusting. These little things that I guarantee schools above the I-8 freeway have never had to worry about, right? I completely support the equitable grading practices because, like I said, there are a lot of discrepancies in between like schools throughout all of San Diego. And so I would like to see the district try to apart from supporting these, whether it be lower income or lower performing schools, I want to see them have the same attitude or energy as their maybe better performing schools, right? And so last year with a college access program, I was with the program myself, we were able to speak to Dr. Shirley Weber. She currently serves as an assembly member in the 79th Assembly District, and she serves in the Assembly for Education, Higher Education for the state of California. Why I bring her up is because she also served on the board and was the president of the San Diego Board of Education. And when we spoke to her, she let us know that 80% of California students are not proficient in both math and English. 80%. And that was horrendous to hear. And I know it's all of California, but the fact that like sunny San Diego is a real big city in California. So what the thing I like to bring up when it comes to being more equitable is the SAT. So the SAT has been proven time and time again that it displays more wealth and privilege over. I'm sorry, let me pull up my notes. The SAT is more privilege and status over caliber and capabilities for our students. Specifically, I know that a friend, because I like to have data and personal experience, a friend went from below 1100 on his PSAT all the way to 1490 just because of a 6-month course with mediocre grades. Now, I know he's a smart kid. I love him to death. But if laziness turns out mediocre grades, then why does an expensive 6-month course turn out some of the best scores in the country, right? Moving away from the SAT, I know that there's a teacher at Hoover that, again, I love him to death. No hate or any sort of bad feelings towards him, but he tutors at Canyon Crest Academy, one of the best schools in California, for rates that Hoover students, I'm sorry, I go to Hoover High School, for rates that Hoover students would never be able to afford. So it's no surprise to me that they might get a higher SAT score or just do better in AP Calculus or AP Stats. Like, I'm not surprised at all. The point I'm trying to make is that this whole I-8 phenomenon that I've learned since I was very young, that maybe some of the students above the I-8 don't know about, it's throughout the whole city, and there shouldn't be this sort of discrepancy between why schools below are doing worse and why schools on top are doing better. It's more about the environment that they're placed in, having the I-8 kids and the schools under the I-8 go to the schools above the I-8. They're met with awes, wows, and they're amazed of the state of the school. Yet when the kids from above come down, they're disgusted, they gag, and they'd rather go back to their school or their environment that they've been raised in. And I think that's disgusting. We shouldn't have this sort of discrepancy in how a student looks at their own school and kind of has this hierarchy of resources that are missing in some schools, and that's why they are lower ranking.
Eric, I have one comment. Do you think you could answer the question specifically, in your own words, just summarize last minute, because we have 2 other areas that we need to cover in a matter of a couple minutes. I'll refresh your memory maybe with the question. It's how does interrupting inequitable grading practices, why does it matter? Why does that matter?
Okay, so as I was saying, this lack of resources can lead to this inequitable grading. So if you have, let's say, a certain teacher that has always had these standards, and suddenly the example that Isolina gave was perfect. When you have students that maybe underperform, they're already shaped. It's psychological. They're already shaped to expect the student to underperform. And there's no reason a teacher should be like that. They should always bring out the best in their students, and they should look to treat every student the same, regardless of the work they've turned in before or the work they're going to turn in the future. I'm sorry for taking up so much time. I'm very sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm hoping we don't have any last minute things, but if anybody has anything to add on, please mention. If not, our next question is, how may we interrupt and dismantle discriminatory practices and student discipline? And India was going to take the lead in this conversation to cover that conversation, because there was not any other students that had that. So
thank you so much for giving me this space. So I think I want people to pay kind of close attention to the next words that I'm about to say. So I want you to imagine an institution whose gates are locked. Bells go off hourly, directing people where to go and when. Announcements are made over the PA system, and officers regularly patrol the yard. Chances are you just either imagined a school or a prison. That should not be a possibility. There should be absolutely no likeness. And I know a lot of you probably just thought, oh, she's being hyperbolic. This is fallacious. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She's making too close of a connection between systems that are not connected. But I want to tell you that the school to prison pipeline is exactly what connects those 2 institutions. It is ridiculous that 66% of all law enforcement referrals within SDUSD are made against Black and Brown students. And it's also ridiculous that in the proposed reforms of the system, that you're just now banning a chokehold against students. Are you really saying that that's the amazing reforms that we're making, is that we're not allowing police officers to choke children on campuses? That's disgusting. That's embarrassing. The reality is that we're living in a system where students are treated as suspects and rather than students. If we're criminalized on a daily basis, we are not allowed to be students. We're seen as these super predators, this rhetoric that was invented to uphold white supremacist norms. Even as we navigate the classroom setting, teachers see us as criminal. And then when we go on to our school of police on school campuses, if we truly are in favor of the safety and equity of all students, we need to completely defund school police. It does not make sense for there to be presence on schools which have historically been known to criminalize students. And if we believe in student voice, as we claim to, then we need to agree with the 3,000 parents, educators, and community members and students who have signed a petition to defund school police and not reform it. Nobody said reform, we said defund completely. So that's my thought on how we can make it more equitable for all students. And I think Jasmine also wanted to.
Yes, I think there is I think you covered a huge area, and I'm curious if any other students want to answer the question: how may we interrupt and dismantle discriminatory practices and student discipline? No one? Okay, well, the last and final question will be covered by myself, India, and
Naidwa.
Naidwa?
Yeah.
Love your name. I'm bad at pronouncing, but
You're fine. You're okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to like my personal experience with restorative justice. Oh, actually, let me read you the question. How may we cultivate restorative communities in our school? And so I'm going into my senior year at Lincoln High School, and I was introduced to restorative justice practices in my 8th grade year at Knox Middle School. We were introduced to that opportunity through youth leadership, and we were running circles in classrooms. And I got to Lincoln High School, and there was already a space there that implemented restorative justice practices. And that was the first place that I really had felt a connection with, because in the 4 years of me being in high school, I've experienced the like power dynamic between teacher and student. And so what that has turned out to be is like preventing us from actually building community within the classrooms. So it was really valuable for me to have a space on campus that was made for us to just have positive school culture experiences, having a freedom to express ourselves and feeling safe. Like in that space, it was a sacred space for me that I was able to learn, implement my leadership that I had learned from middle school. And also it ignited my community organizing skills and my youth advocacy and advocacy for myself when there was conflict between myself, my peers, and teachers. And so that all wouldn't have probably been able to happen without the two adults that were in the space, Mase and JC. They were two trusted adults that really respected every voice in the space and made it very clear and sat there with us and listened to us and really held space for us to allow us to share our lived experiences as young people. And in that space, it turned into a space where we could conflict problem solve. Like when conflicts come up between students, we were able to sit in a circle and figure out our issues just by conversating instead of violence or anything else. So I imagine as a solution to creating those spaces implementing restorative justice practices in a space that's held just for young people to have the freedom of expression, but with adults that are well trusted and that know the value of youth voice and that are willing to put in the work to sit there and listen to us. And I will pass it on to the girls.
Thank you so much for that, Precious. Like, I really appreciate that introduction because that was one of my proposals as well. Because I definitely agree with India. We did not say that we wanted to reform the on-campus police systems at all. And that is none of our demands. And that's not most of the demands of the students who are in the San Diego Unified School District, especially because of the fact that in the beginning of this meeting, Cindy Martin did uplift the fact that this is the time for defiance. The society that we're currently living in right now shows perfectly that police are truly not to be trusted, especially with Black and brown bodies on our campuses. So my proposal is that we do create restorative justice practices, that teachers are taught this, and that we also create student courts. Just like Precious had said, they sat in circles and they fixed the problems among themselves rather than having to go towards police practices to de-escalate situations. And so to basically uplift a topic of this, to uplift one of the pieces of evidence about having police forces on campus. With the 2016 case on Lincoln High School of Jesse Duncan, who was brutalized by on-campus police after he was caught play fighting with his friend. I'm sorry, but if in 2013, if we were saying that Cindy Martin was put into power and that we saw great change within our system, I'm not doing this as an attack, but why is it that we still have police on our campuses when they brutalized one of our students and then he was put into the system? And that further emphasizes the prison to school pipeline. You see it there. He was put into court, and you see all these documents and all these court documents and so on and so forth about what happened with that situation. Black students do not feel comfortable on campuses with police on their campuses. I personally did not feel comfortable on my high school campus with police on campus. So I find it disgusting the fact that we're saying that we should reform this and that we're barely banning on-campus chokeholds now, when I had to see kids on a daily basis at Morris High School being choked by on-campus police as if that was the threat. They were on campus fighting other students, but then they're met by a bigger force. This is not something that we could go ahead and say, oh yeah, we're going to reform this, reform that. Students are calling for change. Students are calling for this to be done. 3,000 signatures on this petition for defund school PD. And we're still here. We're still talking about reform. No, it's not time for that. We quote Baldwin. We quote Angela Davis. We quote John Lewis. These are what our Black Power figures had fought for. They fought for us to have the seat at the table, and this is our seat at the table as students. We are asking for this. Actually, no, we're not asking for it. We are demanding it. I apologize. We are demanding for this to happen because I'm tired of seeing Black bodies criminalized. Restorative justice practices do not have to include police. They include the adults on campus that we trust. They include the adults on campus that our parents trust to be there for 8 hours a day, and that is what we are calling for. Restorative justice practices among students and teachers is what we need to promote actual ethical change within our school systems and within our society. And I urge you all to follow along with what India had said in the past point and to follow along with what Precious had said. These are the demands that we need to happen and to move forth in San Diego Unified School District. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want Precious, you can speak to that too. But that was powerful. I think we can all agree. We're gonna wrap up the student portion now, but I did want to give a chance. This is something we had discussed in some of our planning for students who have brought up their experiences in the past and have quite a bit to say about it. Moving forward, if there's a word or a value that you all would like to share, that you hope to see, that you hope to embrace, that you hope that your teachers and the adults in this space can hear from you, that you would like to see embodied by San Diego Unified School District, now's a great time. Please just unmute, speak out your word, one word, and then I'll pass it back to Precious.
I'm sorry, Ebony, did you mean that we just call out the word right now?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about what we've seen and the experiences we've had, which has been powerful. Moving forward, what is it that if you could embody the one word, or if you could speak on the one word that you would like to see embodied by this district, by the adults, by your peers, what would that one word be moving forward? And yes, please, right now, just unmute. There's no order, but if you could choose one word, now is the time to speak it.
Reform, probably not with the police. Like, we want that sort of on the way out, but reform within the teachers and the student and racial inequality.
Thank you, Ben. Anybody else? Your one word, just shout it out.
Respect.
Echo, I heard respect. Thank you.
Equality.
Tiari's got equality.
Action.
The radical restructuring of power structures.
Thank you, India.
Radicalism.
Compassion. I would also like to question why this was such a sudden question brought up when it was clear India still wanted to talk about the topic.
I'm sorry, Stephanie, can you repeat your question?
I was wondering why this was such a sudden question brought up and interrupting the dialogue when it was clear that India was also involved in this conversation and wanted to speak on it more.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was taking Nayaduth's ending of big giving back the mic. I was not clear that I had missed something from India.
I think they elaborated they want the both of them to speak.
Yeah, I think we are just coming to the end so we could wrap up on the other side with the questions that the board had. So they had some questions that they wanted to ask us towards the end. If that's still time that's available, because they're going to ask us questions, and that'll be like super valuable. And I know India, if you still wanted to get that last minute thing in, but like I know we're running short on time and they want to just wrap things up because we're like whole 45 minutes over time.
Oh, thank you so much for your advocacy, Stephanie. I love it. The only thing I wanted to say was that when we proposed defunding school police, we proposed to create a community-led commission on how we can rethink our discipline plan with restorative practices at the forefront. That's all I really wanted to say.
And was there anyone else that wanted to wrap up with their one comment? Or Ebony, do you want to take it away to give it back to the board or have them ask us questions?
Yeah, that's all we have in terms of this section. So I would love to pass it to Dr. Evans to see if the board can take some time to respond to the demands of the students and the questions that they asked, as well as their own questions.
Thank you very much. It's difficult to follow such articulate students. I mean, on this board, I've seldom heard a group of people come and speak so eloquently and passionately about these issues. In terms of board action, the staff has outlined a lot of steps that they're going to be taking over the next few months. There are a few items in terms of policy, in terms of inclusivity officers and resource teachers, and some changes in terms of discipline policy that are very specific, but we can handle that particular motion at the end because there's a combination in the staff presentation in terms of a few things that can be done right today and many things that involve engaging stakeholders on all these issues we're talking about, from police to restorative justice to ethnic studies and so forth. It's going to be ongoing work. So, but at this point, because it is a workshop, it's not a regular business meeting, I just want to open it up to the board at this point, and the board has had a little bit of a chance to digest some of what the students have said. I think there's a lot to respond to here and a lot to really think about very carefully, and so I would say that the board at this point can either make comments based on what you have heard from the student advocates, or you can ask them questions more specifically. So at this point, I will open it up to board members. I'm trying to see if I can see the faces of everybody to see who might want to speak. Is there a board member that wants to speak? And I would say, don't want to put anyone on the spot, but we might start with our student board member. If you want to, if not, we'll give you a chance to wait and go on to somebody else, because Zachary Patterson led the effort to have an official student representative on the school board and was elected as the first official student member of our school board.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Evans. This is definitely a lot to process, and this is definitely a heavy discussion. I want to start by saying that I understand that I have white privilege, and I understand and recognize the fact that I'm not going to experience a lot of the things that many people on this call have today. But I want to say that I'm going to do my very best to surround myself with the people that are going to make me be successful. And that's why I have a student advisory board full of students from all across the school district to help me better understand some of the issues that we're facing as a school district. These are very, very difficult topics to discuss because they're so contentious, but they shouldn't be. Because these are ideas of basic human rights and the ideas of including all students in a system that's supposed to be designed for all students. Every student and what they've said is completely right in the idea that if we want to create a system that empowers every student, and we want to live up to our mission statement and our vision as a school district of providing every student with the skills, motivation, and curiosity to succeed in college or career choice, then we have to be willing to provide an environment where that can happen. And there are definite places where we're not achieving that yet. And I think that the staff has put forward really good recommendations, but we know that they're just the beginning, and this conversation is just the beginning. We're going to continue to move forward to work on things like this and to find ways to incorporate student voices of color, student voices that represent BIPOC and the district as a whole in order to create the best system possible. We know that there are major inequalities that are happening in this school district, and these are things that we must confront, address, and move forward on. And once again, I thank you to every student who attended and came. This is an amazing workshop and definitely the best meeting that I've been able to attend. I'm honored to be in your presence.
Thank you, Zachary. Any other board members, comments or questions? Okay, Trustee Barrera.
Well, first I just want to, it's been a privilege, really a privilege for us to be able to hear the student's voice and the student's perspective. My question right now, as I'm hearing,
I can't hear.
Okay, we had a little audio technical problem, so let's see if we have that corrected.
Does this work? Can people hear?
Yes, I can. Well,
okay.
Richard, it's a little muffled still for some reason.
How about this? Is that better? No, not really. Okay.
It's a little better when you lean in, maybe.
Yeah, lean in and speak louder, project.
It might be because you have headphones in and you put your headphones in the middle of the meeting.
Headphones where, Precious?
You might have put your headphones in the middle of the meeting, like in the Zoom meeting. So like the audio, like the mic is.
thank you for all the technical assistance.
Okay. Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
That's much better. Thanks.
Okay. No, thank you. So again, it's a privilege for us to be able to hear directly from the students, and I would imagine that every adult in this meeting believes that if you were running this district at all levels, we would be making more progress on these issues that we're talking about today. And my question at this point in your lives, which is a difficult question, but do any of you see yourself want to spend your lives and your careers as educators and at all levels, whether it's teachers, principals, administrators, superintendents, members of boards of education, counselors, all other levels? Do any of you see yourself wanting to be in the education system and I'd be interested in hearing kind of why or why not at this point.
I would love to say just a little bit. Like, honestly, immediately, I think of the struggle that I'm going to have to go through to get to the place that all of you are at. I think, yes, I want to be an educator. Yes, I want to get to the place where all of these board people are. But how am I going to get there? I've never seen that pathway before. I know already that I'm going to have struggles as a Black woman in San Diego, in America. So, like, what steps am I actually going to have to take to get there? And so that's the first thing that crosses my mind. That's what would make me immediately hesitate stepping into that role, and knowing that I might not ever get to where I hope I would be in the education system. If anybody else wants to share.
No, that's really
I would.
Thank you.
I agree with Precious.
I would love to be an educator. I think that's a career choice I picked, but as Precious said too, that I don't know the path to get there. Like, I would love to be a high school teacher, but honestly, I would stop there because, like, higher up you get, honestly, it looks less diverse, and being the first seems like fun and cool to be like, but also from my own experiences, being like the only like few other people of color in a group, it's uncomfortable and sometimes will draw the attention away from it.
To the point that everyone is making, I would like to uplift a statistic that Black people who have graduated college are equally as likely as white people who've only gotten a high school diploma or GED to be employed. So I could go 4 years of college, leave with exorbitant amounts of student debt, and still be unemployed, sitting in the line next to a white person who's only have their GED or high school diploma. So, I mean, the opportunity gaps here are just ridiculous. And even if you strive for those positions of achievement, the oppression and systemic inequities that we face are immense.
Anybody else want to comment on this question?
John.
Yes.
I find that disturbing that we have here 3 African American females who don't see themselves as, I know role models out in the community who should be mentoring them, including myself, because it is possible. And I feel really badly for them because I had all African American teachers except one, K through 12. And it did lead to a different result, a different outcome, because we saw ourselves in all positions: doctors, lawyers, teachers, administrators, etc. And there was no question about that. Granted, it was a segregated South, but the role models were there. And for our system, that's why I'm always pushing on everybody about the fact that we must have more role models out there for our students so that they can see themselves and go through what they need to do. I'm particularly interested in India's comment about having a degree and being equivalent to the person who has a high school diploma of a different race or ethnicity and at the same level. That's a constant complaint, and it leads to a comment I was going to make about this whole business of the affirmative action. When you look at the statistics, and I really want to challenge those who made reports today on the staff side to really look at the results of 209, because it did have the impact of what it was intended to do. Prop 209 was Baki, and he was upset that an African American had gotten in. So it was intended to really be a chilling effect upon African Americans, and we've gotten those results. And so I just think that we have no choice as a society to recognize the damage that Prop 209 did and to pass the affirmative action bill in the fall, because we are discriminating against folks unnecessarily. So, and there are a lot of comments I could say the students were right on the money. They had excellent comments. The student, Aaron, talked about the Harvard and MIT study. Noah Nevitt, who talked about Knox and having a teacher of color. Daniel, who talked about having a teacher of color who supported him, and on and on and on. I mean, I think that we have no choice but to act quickly. And I think that it's not good enough to say we're going to do a program like that. We need to have specifics in terms of timelines so that things don't just, we're going to do, let's say this, so we have benchmarks to say whether or not we're making progress. Richard and I talked about the fact that we had a committee years ago before I came on the board, and we still don't have those kind of tangible outcomes that we were looking for. So we've got to be more definitive about it. And in terms of, I'm not going to comment too much on the police thing, other than to say that it's very good. We've gotten a sample of 3,000 students, folks to comment on that. I never looked at school police necessarily as for folks inside the system, but more for folks on the outside of the system, because we have both an internal and an external issue where we're required to provide safety for our students from external forces, folks coming onto our campuses who have no business being on our campuses. So that factor needs to be looked at, because I personally remember after what happened in Florida, going to a campus and having walked onto the campus and learning that someone had come onto the campus and walked right into the campus, so they were not secure. And so I just think we have to look at the whole picture of that when we're discussing it. And having said that, I think that what we've been presented with today is a beginning place. And I'd like to see more going forward, and with some timelines and some specifics coming out of it to address concerns that have been raised in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whitehurst-Payne. Other board members want to comment or ask a question of our student voices here? Dr. McQuarrie.
Yeah, thank you, President Evans. So we've gathered here today to examine the barriers to equity and to consider recommended changes for disrupting the current practices that have failed to produce equity, and it is our need to produce greater opportunities for all students. We've had this valuable experience today to hear your stories, to listen to your voices, and to benefit from your experiences. The combined staff and student report was excellent, and your requests for actions are supported by your experiences and the research. My question is, what has been the number one barrier, and what do you see as the priority for bringing about greater equity for all students in this school district?
Okay, there's a good question. Trying to, of all the things we've talked about, what would be the top priority?
Yeah.
In my opinion, it seems like the top priority should be the disciplinary matters, because although no one's denying that ethnic studies and inequities in grading and diverse teachers are important, because they are, when BIPOC students are expelled or suspended unjustly compared to their Caucasian counterparts, it can discourage them for the rest of their lives, and it leaves a permanent Black stamp on their record. And it's just a red flag for everyone coming up onto their file, and it can affect them for the rest of their life more than I feel a failing class would.
Thank you, Alyssa. Anybody else want to respond to Dr. McQuarrie's question?
Sure.
I think
So what I've seen is that there's like high representation of Caucasian teachers, and then there's low punishment rates for Caucasian students. And then you see there's hardly any representation of Hispanic or Black teachers, and you see lots of punishment among Hispanic and Black students. I feel like there could be a connection there. The students don't have a role model to look up to. They could see the white teachers and they could say, I would never be able to do that or have that high authority. They see the white police officers. And I feel like if we fix that, have equal representation, I feel it would fix a lot of problems.
Thank you.
I think that in agreement with what Alyssa said, the disciplinary section is probably the most important. I think that police presence on campus poses an imminent threat to all Black and Indigenous and students of color. And that is of utter importance. If you can't feel safe on campus, forget learning. I mean, if you can't feel like you can walk through a hallway without potentially being singled out and criminalized by police officers on campus, I mean, history class is the least of your concerns. So I think that is necessary. And then it also promotes the decolonization and demilitarization of school campuses, because if we understand why we're doing it, then that means that we have a deeper understanding of the way that Black, Indigenous, and students of color are continuously oppressed by a white supremacist system of education that exists within America.
Thank you.
Agreeing with Alyssa. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I'll keep it short. I personally find it very challenging to answer this question because it's almost as if we're limiting ourselves to how much change we can bring to our schools and just in general. But if I did have to choose one, it would definitely be the disciplinary aspect of it. That's my take on it.
Agreeing with Alyssa and you now, Diana. I feel like there should also be a willingness to listen. The Defund the Police, San Diego police movement have made their demands clear. They have been pushing these demands, and it is frankly disrespectful that they have not been met yet. And it's important that we have a discussion like this, but it's also important to know that these are people who have been asking for these things. We have been addressing institutionalized systems that are racist. We've been addressing these. I think it's time now to recognize that the police are an institutionalized racist institution themselves, and they should be addressed accordingly.
Thank you.
I'd like to say, going back with some evidence that Aaron brought up with expectations, I think with diversity, with staff diversity, I think that's the most important. Because if you have a diverse staff that students can relate to or connect to, you build a safe community for students. And that's the first step in taking to ensure that students have their own expectations met or like for themselves, and their well-being is kept safe, knowing that another teacher of color or who is similar to them is there and can help them through.
Thank you, Daniel.
I agree with Daniel, and I feel that our utmost priority should be making sure that students feel safe in their classrooms and walking through schools and the hallways, whether it be making sure that there's not as many discriminatory disciplinary processes or having a more diverse staff. It's just we need to make sure that students feel like they're heard and are safe and welcomed and accepted and just respected for who they are, and that they have the opportunity to learn and grow and just feel welcomed at school.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Any other board member want to make any further comments or questions? Dr. McCory, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to, Dr. Whitehurst, can you see the book? Can you see that?
It says
I
cultural
see it and I
proficiency.
have it, yes.
Yeah, so
I
Dr.
see that and
Whitehurst,
I have it.
Payne and I have participated in a course for bringing about equity in our schools with other school districts across the state. And we were using as our study cultural proficiency. And we're finding that developing capacity for equity and for improving students' experience and their outcomes comes down to an emphasis on developing cultural proficiency. So it's been a very valuable lesson for both of us, and I know it has prepared me in so many ways to be able to not only hear the words that you're saying, but to feel the experiences that you are sharing. And I want to thank you.
Okay, any other board comments or questions?
Yeah, Dr. Evans, if I
Yes.
could just have a couple of moments.
Sure, Trustee Beiser.
You know, I just want to thank all the students for coming forward and speaking your truth. As I've sat here over the last few hours and listened to your passion, your pleas, your ideas to try to make this a better world, I would be remiss if I didn't share that I'm having flashbacks to when I was a student in the 1980s. With a group of students, we petitioned to try to get the SAT tests banned because it was in the 1980s that we first started realizing through research and evidence that the college SAT test was biased against people of color. Then when I went on to college, I joined with two other students and we petitioned the Board of Trustees at Willamette University, where I went to undergrad school in Salem, Oregon, to divest their money in South Africa as a stand against the racist policies of the South African apartheid government at the time. Then in 1988, I voted for the first time ever for an individual who I strongly believed would have made one of the best presidents this country had ever seen. In 1988, I voted for Jesse Jackson to be president of the United States in the Democratic primary. I voted for Jesse Jackson and volunteered for him and supported him, not because he was African American, but because he was the leader of a rainbow coalition. He believed in the truth of our country and our possibilities, that there are so much that we can accomplish when we work together to really address the inequality, inequity amongst social, not just social, but also economics. Because poverty disproportionately affects people of color, but poverty does not discriminate. While I am a white, male, gay man, I don't think that I benefit from white advantage. I benefit from dominant ethnic advantage. If you look across the planet at various countries, almost every dominant ethnic group has racist advantages built into their systems. We must find the root of that dominant ethnic advantage in our own society and try to find out ways and strategies to make our country more equal. I was never a member of a dominant wealth background. I grew up in abject poverty. We lived in a tent when I was in middle and high school. We had to forage through dumpsters behind grocery stores and fast food chains and restaurants for our food. And I'm not a member of the dominant sexual orientation in our society. I think that this is very, very important that we recognize and understand as we try to really answer the fundamental question: are human beings fundamentally good, or are human beings fundamentally evil and racist and filled with hate? And that's the question. I believe that human beings are fundamentally good. And I believe people are taught to treat others. And I think we have to do what we can within our school district and our society and our community to help teach people from the earliest age the values that we all share. And that's to be kind and to treat each other with respect and to try to remedy the centuries of injustice, hate, and racism that have permeated our culture in the United States. I'm hopeful for the future, and I hope that that the students and the adults that are a part of this process of always trying to improve our society will continue, because from my long studies of history, from 400 years ago with slavery to 2,000 years ago when the Bible explained how to treat your slaves. The Bible talks about the proper treatment of slaves. The Constitution of the United States talks about how to apportion a vote to slaves. We've got to move on. I honestly believe in my heart that the institution of slavery has not ended in our world or our society. I believe that we have transformed slavery into other ways. And I think in some ways, we have got to recognize that reality, and we've got to address it with things like the basic income, where like in the state of Alaska, every single person that lives in Alaska gets a check from the government. I honestly believe that one of the best things that we as a society can do to try to mitigate the discrimination is to make sure every single citizen in our country receives a basic earned income. It would eliminate poverty in our country. And I believe that, along with a lot of other initiatives, are things that we need to continue to look at and to never give up. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Beiser. When I myself ran for the school board several years ago, I had a lot of ideals. I talked a lot about creating a level playing field, making sure that there was a quality school in every neighborhood. And obviously, the reality is we are not there. And everyone has spoken, and I and the others on the board are accountable for the current state of the district. That's how it works when you get into a position like this. And everybody is very impressed with the articulate nature of this group and the passion. But I think what you don't want to hear is you have spoken eloquently and passionately, and thank you very much for sharing, and we'll go on with our lives. That you really want to see action in terms of changes and some things really happening. And so I have a question just to throw out to the group, first of all, and maybe we can do this in a more organized way with the people who have organized all these groups of students. But in terms of these issues that we're talking about, in terms, starting with, hiring practices, with ethnic studies, with grading and course availability, all the academic part, and then in a whole huge area of it, school environment, safety, restorative justice, discipline, and so forth. As we move forward, there's a few specific things we're doing today, but as we're moving forward in the next couple of months with having groups working on these different factors, I'm curious if any of you want to continue as student advocates, specifically working in any one of these areas. If you could just, again, like I said, we can make lists and be a little more formal about it, but if you just if anyone just kind of wants to throw out what they're interested in working on, and because it's, like I said, when I ran, it was one thing to say, this is where I think things should be. And it's another thing to be in the position where you actually have some ability to make some changes. And I'm wondering which ones of you might want to work on particular topics that we've discussed today.
Personally, for me, I'm not sure if you're like opening this up for like dialogue now.
Yes, I am.
Okay, but personally for me, I would definitely like to continue working on campus disciplinary actions and so on and so forth. As you guys could all see, I was very passionate when I was talking about defunding school PD. Sure. But the thing is, I would only want to work on it if I'm with a group of like-minded adults who are all working towards the same goal of defunding them. If that's not the case, then I'm going to work with my outside organization and continue pushing forward for them to be defunded and try to get pressure from the outside. But if we have others who are willing to basically speak onto that and basically continue being able to work with that, then I would. And to Miss Whitehurst's point, who had basically said we have to look at the whole entire view, and she had brought up school shootings as well. I would like to uplift and make note of the fact that even during the majority Stillman Douglas school shooting, the school SRO and the on-campus police, they were nowhere to be found when the shooting was taking place. They had actually walked off the campus and basically said that they didn't want to be harmed in the process. So I understand that from all schools that's not the case, and that many other police officers on campus may be the first to be put on the line. But when we bring up school shootings, let's talk about the whole thing as well. Many school officers don't want to be involved in that process. Many of them are like, I was just here to protect on-campus stuff, and now this is a whole shooting that's going on. What do I do now? They walk off and leave their station. So all I'm saying is I'm more than willing to be part of a board or a committee that's willing to work towards campus disciplinary actions and work with other students on how we could create restorative justice practices within the school. But I'm only able to do so much if others around me are with the same goal of defunding school PD. But if that's not the case, then I guess that's just my piece. That's just my bit, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Nadwa. Good points.
And John, I'd like to respond to that.
Sure.
Sorry.
Just FYI, I guess she's right about that example of what happened. But personally, I was on last year, the ASB presidents of all the schools. We met with them after that incident happened, and they talked to us about the fact that they were afraid to go to school, period, because of the shooting, because they didn't know whether or not their peers would be someone, instead of studying, that would be there to shoot them. So there's that side of it. An example I talked about was an elementary school, Paradise Hills specifically, where I walked on the campus and it wasn't secure, it wasn't located right, and a homeless person just came on the campus, and they tried to get our police, tried to get San Diego PD, and it took National City Police Department to respond. So I thought about all those babies there, and no one was there to help with that incident. That's what I mean, looking at the total picture. And I personally have had some experience and know how San Diego PD responds to our incidents versus how our school police responds. And I would say that the whole picture needs to be examined. And that's why I say I understand those who are saying defund, but I also know of a lot of examples where our folks have been able to get there to help school out, not with internal incidents as much as the external, from folks just wandering in or getting on our campus and doing things like that. And we've got over 200 some facilities. So that just to me needs to be looked at with an open mind to see. For those students last year who were telling us with tears that they did not feel safe on campus without someone there. And now we have the other paradigm shift. Let's just look at the whole picture, is all I'm saying. And I hope that that you will be the chair of that committee and work to get what you want, recognizing that this is America and we all share, we all participate. We open our minds and listen to what everybody's saying. I'm hearing what you're saying, and I hope you hear what I'm saying, what the students said last year, and we get the best results for San Diego City Schools.
I definitely do hear what you're saying, and I appreciate you for commenting back. But I guess my question to you or to whoever then would just be that, if students, like if, you did meet with ASB students and they did say that they wanted campus police there because they felt more safe, then how do we respond to Black students on campus who say they don't feel safe with having campus police there as well? So how do we, if we're looking at the whole picture, how can I say Like,
and I'm glad you asked that question. That's an excellent question, because to me, they're a microcosm of America. You see this kind of discrimination everywhere in America, and it is unacceptable at every level. So you're absolutely right that we go after it there. We go after it in not only the police department, in the city council, in the assembly, in the grocery store, wherever we are, in the classroom with the teachers, wherever you are, you systematically go after it. And you call it out. And I really appreciate Bruce Bivens bringing those data today, because we've heard this before. Even when Dr. Weber was on the board, we had this kind of disparity. That's why I say I'm tired of talking about it. Let's eliminate it. Suspensions, expulsions, whatever, in the classroom, grades, every time, everywhere, not just only in police, but throughout our society. We've got to call it out and deal with it. That's what's going to make the change for me.
Absolutely. And I even want to speak to your point about students feeling unsafe in the Parkland incident and what that meant for March for Our Lives. I want to emphasize that not once did the March for Our Lives students, this is a student-led it started as a grassroots movement, not once did they call for more police on schools. They said gun reform. And so what we need is gun reform. And we need to be able to feel safe on our campuses, because there is not this flagrant and this ridiculous availability of guns. So I think that is a response that we can make. And we can also talk about the fact that ASB students who are in positions of leadership in ASB are going to be predominantly white, and they're going to be predominantly students who benefit from privilege, and even if they're not white in other ways. And so listening to them, I think that's even a bigger problem in the way that in the students that we listen to and the way that we listen to them. Why is it that so many of the students that we choose to listen to are the students that are doing well in the system, or students that have great grades, and they're going to these top institutions when they leave schools, and they're just having a wonderful time? Like, we have suits in our closets, and we're ready to go put on our heels to go to board meetings and shake hands with people. But it's like, we need to be talking to the students who don't have the suit in their closet, to the students who may have like failed half their classes in the first semester. Those are the students that are not being served well by the system, and those are the students who are being treated the least equitably within our district. So maybe that's just a point to bring.
No, that's excellent, because I wonder why none of you applied to ran to be the school board representative. Because
I was going to ask about that.
Sorry. I mean,
yeah. So
I'm sorry. I just wondered why, because I look at students who come to the ASB meetings. I look at students who run for this kind of position, and you do need to be heard. If more than half of our students are students of color, push out the representation. We need that kind of voice. We need to hear from you. And that's why today I've really appreciated all that you've said. Everybody's had a lot to say. And I mean, it's right on the money, because I'm the only African American on this board, and this board will tell you, public will tell you, every time I'm on the dais, I'm pushing folks, the superintendent, every week when I meet with her, I have some issue that I'm pushing with her to deal with this. And I mean, we could all use some support to get out there, but it feels like I'm the lone voice out there in the wilderness screaming and yelling. And so for me today to hear you all talking, it's been great. Absolutely wonderful. And I encourage you to stay engaged and stay involved, so that it's not just one person out here trying to fight this battle alone like the windmill.
To comment on that, I actually tried to run for it, but I lost. And then also, I am currently the interim ASB president of Cooper High School, but I get you guys see about that, because honestly, and after like starting to get involved with district wide, that there is like a big problem with like student representation, because I've sat in meetings, done like workshops where it's like it's dominantly white students, and I sit back because I feel like I'm the only person that's not white, and then sit back. I'm like, I can't speak my opinion, because no one in the room will understand.
Well, I mean, I think you're really getting at what this whole workshop is about. If you, as a student who feel that you have something to share and you're a student of color and you feel like you're being marginalized and not allowed to speak, then we, at all levels, somebody said it earlier, at all levels, we need to address the lack of diversity. And if we can't get a student in, then maybe we need to have 2 student board members, and one of them needs to be a designated student of color. I mean, that's what affirmative action is about, because otherwise we're missing out on that voice. And I'll stop here, but I just think that we've got to look at it systemically all the way up and down, from board members, from we can only have one superintendent, but cabinet level and every position, principals, etc. We've got to have that kind of representation that we need so that we can hear all voices and not just a one set of opinions.
I think one point that was made that was really important was, in terms of listening to students from different situations in school, academically, economically, and so forth, because you can get together the ASB president from each school and so forth and so on. I remember when I went to, before the pandemic, I went to Lincoln High School and said I wanted to shadow a student. I said, don't have me shadow, the ASB president or someone who's highly involved in the school. I wanted to see a more typical Lincoln student. Now, part of the problem was trying to find someone who's a student at the high school who's willing to have an old white guy follow you around all day in school. That was another issue, but we did find one. And so I think there is this issue of broadening the whole voices, but with all of you who are speaking so well about all of this, that's why I brought up this question of, on these particular issues, and Nada was, responded to it right away. Is there a particular issue that you would like to be involved in terms of on a committee that is looking at this issue, whether it's the hiring, the ethnic practices, the grading, the discipline and environment? This is your opportunity to kind of get involved and speak up and to sort of wrestle with some of the issues. I mean, for example, when we always face a tremendous budget difficulty, and yet the staff is bringing forward here, okay, on the issue of hiring, we need to have an inclusivity, diversity officer, someone who's specifically, pushing us to do this, because if not, we have all these good intentions, but we're not getting there. The same way with ethnic studies, we have a pilot program going, but if we don't have the resource teachers to train all of the other teachers on doing this, then we're not going to move forward on it. And the same way on all the other issues too. So, you don't have to, sign up to a committee or say right now, but I just really want to put it out there that, that we certainly welcome your voices when we're actually getting down to the nitty gritty and figuring out on the ground level how to make these things work. Any other comments? Yes, Zachary Patterson.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize quickly, I'm not like gripping for power saying I have to be the only student on the board. This is my role, nobody else. That's not my mentality at all. And I want to emphasize that if we want to have a discussion to include multiple students on the board, if we want to have a discussion on re-envisioning all of our student committees, if we want to address the idea of putting a student on the Ethnic Studies Committee, all of our LCAP committees, our DLAC, anything with AC. I mean, there is no reason that we can't put students in. Yes, my role on the board, and if you want to bring on another student, go ahead. I told you I'm going to surround myself with people that make me be the most effective, and that's why I work with Brianna constantly. I call her pretty frequently and ask her to participate in things. I work with her, and I work with my advisory board, because I know that this is a difficult job. And the question of how do you represent 100,000 students, you don't. You include other students in this discussion. So if we want to move forward and we want to talk about something like that, please, by all means. I know I'm white, and I know that the majority of students in our district are people of color. And I mean, I do love government and I really enjoy my job here, but I recognize that there are people that will be inevitably left out. So if we want to have a discussion on incorporating another student or incorporating students onto any of our committees, this is something that we're constantly pushing for. And I mean, it's in my platform that I've wanted to implement the entire time, putting students on these advisory committees and on the different oversight committees of our district. It's not that crazy. And these are actual steps that we can take to implement student voice. And once again, as I said, yes, I totally get that I'm white and I don't represent the majority of people of color in the school district. And that's why I'm totally, I mean, that's not the only reason, but that is one of the many reasons that I'm totally open to equally distributing power among different ethnicities and representations.
Okay, thank you, Zachary. At this point, we have, the staff has given us a presentation and some specific things that they need board approval on. A lot of it is based on direction that's been given previously and some of the specifics of how they're doing it. But particularly some of the things have to be done at a very practical level. So I will entertain a motion in just a minute on some of these on these items as a whole, if that's possible. But first of all, just kind of quickly going through the different areas, and I can't cover it all comprehensively, but on the whole hiring issue, one immediate change was to have an inclusivity officer, and there are other issues in terms of looking at the new teachers who might be more diverse and how they can be, what we can do to improve retention of them, and a lot of other issues, the site equity team and so forth. But specifically, because it's a budget item and that has to be approved by the board, that's one item that we need to move on in this general motion. Also in the ethnic studies, there are a lot of ideas that the staff is moving forward in terms of having a micro credential where teachers are specialized in ethnic studies, and the whole point of expanding the courses across the district. And as one of the participants said, I don't remember who it was, in terms of, we want ethnic studies from K to 12 or pre-K to 12, not just a high school course. But on that specifically, there was a call for, again, on the budget for 3 resource teachers so we can really bring this to scale rather than just having a few courses here and there, and along with some release time for some of the current ethnic studies teachers to work with other teachers. On the grading policy, there were a lot of things that were going to be brought forward later in terms of any reforms to our grading practices, but the whole idea of, but really challenging this whole idea of what is the purpose of EPS. And my comment is that, our school system was set up not for student success. Our school system was set up for classification, to classify and categorize our students. So you are an A, you're a B, you're an F, and that's your label, as opposed to, do we really want them to learn the material, which is why, what is the point of Fs versus what someone said, that the not yet grade in terms of continuing until you master. So there's a lot of work still being done on the grading issue. And then on the big issue of restorative justice and discipline and school safety and so forth, there was we're looking at what's going on with the police department and putting that all up to the microscope and seeing what we need to do in that department. But specifically for today, on the state level, we have this issue of willful defiance in terms of suspensions and expulsions, and that has been eliminated by the state for pre-K to 5. The staff recommendation was to immediately do away with that as a means of expulsion for middle school, and then to meet with stakeholders to look at eliminating that for high school. There's a lot more meat than what I've just said, but in order to have the staff at least take the first steps to move forward with this, could we have a motion to adopt the staff recommendations? Okay, so moved by Trustee Barrera.
Second.
Okay, just a second. Not a motion. He wants to make a comment first.
Yeah, I certainly supportive of the staff recommendations and will support or make a motion to approve the staff recommendations. I think
people can't hear you again. I'm sorry.
Thank you for pointing that out. And he's gonna.
Sorry about that, Superintendent. Can people hear now? Does this work? Yeah, okay. So, I'm certainly supportive of the staff recommendations, and I think some of the recommendations are very important and are breaking new ground, particularly around ethnic studies, actually in all of the areas. Creation of the diversity and inclusivity officer, grading practices, disciplinary practices. I think in some cases, those staff recommendations could actually be more aggressive. But before supporting the staff recommendations, I actually have a motion that I'd like to make. And so if I could make that motion now, President Evans.
Dr. Evans, you're still muted.
Excuse me, I was looking at Trustee Pizer, who happens to be in the same room. Okay, what I was saying is that you're going to move the staff recommendations of what's already been mentioned, and you're adding on another motion to supplement that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll supplement the motion to approve the staff recommendations with a motion to create a new structure in our district, which would be an independent citizens oversight committee on racial justice and equity. And let me give a little context for why I'm making that motion. I think that, when we look at the James Baldwin quote, for instance, and we talk about doing this work means confronting so much institutional barriers, inertia. That resonated with me because nothing that we're discussing here today is new. Every one of these conversations are conversations that we've actually had for several years. And I absolutely appreciate the staff and student presentations. I appreciate the honesty in the presentation of the data. I appreciate the people articulating their core beliefs. But I think one of the challenges in moving from a non-racist to an anti-racist district, and one of the institutional challenges that we face in a place like our district, in a place that we'd like to think of as a progressive-minded community. I think one of the challenges is that we're really good at talking about these issues. We're really good at expressing our beliefs, and we tend to be really bad at taking action and actually making change. And I think that's, I think that's a particular challenge. I think if you look at history, if you look at the, civil rights movement, other movements, it's often in the, if we think about, anti-discrimination, some of the worst discrimination in this country has been in places like the North, California, places that we think about as blue areas, partly because we tend to think of ourselves as, non-racist. And and then we compare ourselves to places that are absolutely racist, and we feel good about ourselves, and we feel that we're really good at being clear about what we believe, and yet we don't act and we don't move. And I think that if we are going to move from having this amazing conversation tonight, powerful conversation, to actually seeing progress on all of the issues, particularly the data points that were revealed in the presentation, I think if we don't have a clear structure that demands follow-up and regular accountability, I think we'll be having another really good conversation like this maybe next year, maybe 3 years down the line, because after all, there are so many important things that come up all the time, and the next thing that we know, we haven't talked about these issues, for a long period of time. I think, let's be realistic. The fact that we've had this conversation so many times before. Now, I think not to the degree that we've had student voice in this conversation tonight. But the fact that, these are not new issues, and frankly, these are not new strategies, and these certainly are not new data points. If we expect to be able to actually make progress and become anti-racist, meaning we're taking action to dismantle these structures that produce these outcomes, I think we need an ongoing independent committee that is regularly monitoring our progress on these issues and holding all of us accountable. The concept of an independent citizens oversight committee is something that we borrow from, for instance, when we pass bond measures. So when we go to the voters and we say, we're asking you to raise your taxes to invest in our schools, something that comes with that legally is the creation of an independent citizens oversight committee. In other words, a group of people who don't work for the district or are not in a position that that their voice is dependent on their employment within the district, but a group of people who can examine, in that case, are we doing what we told the voters we were going to do, that can make regular reports and recommendations to the board, but that also report out on a regular basis to the public what's happening. So an independent committee who reports out to the public whether or not we're making progress on those issues. And so I think that structure of an independent citizens oversight committee is something that I would add to the motion to approve the staff recommendations. And, the Independent Citizens Oversight Committee, I believe, should meet quarterly. I believe should have full access to all of the data that's necessary for them to monitor progress and report to the public and make recommendations. I think it should be an open, it should be a public a committee that meets in public meetings subject to open meeting laws. I think that committee should be made up of students and teachers and classified employees and principals and community organizations that are involved in the day-to-day work of advancing racial justice and equity. I believe the committee should be co-chaired by a student and somebody who works in a community-based organization that's working on racial justice and equity. And I think that committee should make at least an annual report out to the public about whether we're making progress on these issues. Having that structure alone, of course, won't solve all of our problems, but without that structure, I don't think we will hold ourselves accountable with a sense of urgency in a way that gives me confidence that the next time we have this discussion, we will actually see change in the outcomes. So that's my proposal. It's to approve the staff recommendations and to create an independent citizens oversight committee on racial justice and equity that regularly monitors our progress and reports out to both the board and to the public about the progress that we're making.
John, I second that, and I want to say something about it too. Because
okay, go ahead.
Richard, you're right that even that's not new, because when I was affirmative action administrator for San Diego City Schools, we had an outside committee, and I think we need to bring all of that back because obviously we've lost a lot of ground, and we need to go forward. So I second this motion, and I think we should do all the things you articulated. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to add, Trustee Barrera, would you consider putting in the motion explicitly that the co-chair has to be a student and that at least 1/3 of the committee needs to be made up of students.
I am happy to take that friendly amendment to my motion.
Thank you.
As it already listed on the motion that he wrote up, it listed that a student would be a co-chair. There were representatives from various employee groups, community members, PTA, and so forth, and students.
Could you add that at least 1/3 part? That would be the only thing that I think.
Okay. 1/3 added in terms of student participation, membership on the board. So what? I hear an echo in here. So just 1 second here, and I'll get to India. So the motion is basically to approve the staff recommendations and to have an overarching part to it, which is to hold ourselves accountable. It's almost like we're setting up our own grand jury in terms of telling ourselves, you know, this is what we're going to do, and now we're going to have some outsiders hold us accountable to saying we're going to do what we're going to do. And as Trustee Barrera said, we've been talking about this a long time. We've been talking about it since Reverend George Walker Smith was on the board, since Dr. Shirley Weber, and a lot of other good people are on the board. There's the motion and the second. I think India wanted to make a comment, if I'm not mistaken.
I was wondering, I don't know if I would like to recommend that there be no citizenship or grade requirement for students who would like to be representatives on that board.
Great idea. Yeah, completely.
Agreed.
100%.
Agreed.
Okay, agreed by the maker of the motion and the person the second, and that's a really, really good point.
President Evans, could we
yes.
also add that the demographic makeup of the students on the committee be representative or proportional of the demographic makeup of the student body as a whole?
I think that is Trustee Barrera.
I would agree with Trustee Biser's recommendation. However, I do think we need to see representation of African American students and adults. That would be a larger percentage than the percentage of African American students in our district.
Right.
Absolutely.
So we would have a diverse group, but when we're talking about racial justice and equity, where there's a particular emphasis at this point on African Americans. Okay, that is the motion and the second. If there are no further comments from board members, let's vote on this. I will start with Student Trustee Patterson.
Aye.
Trustee Barrera.
Aye.
Trustee Biser.
Aye.
Trustee McQuarrie.
Aye.
Trustee Whitehurst Payne.
Aye.
And Trustee Evans. Aye. Okay, so that passes 5-0 in addition to our student board members. So that means that we will move forward with the recommendations and the work that's going to begin on building an anti-racist school community and restorative justice, and also with the Independent Citizens Oversight Committee. So at this point, I want to thank everybody who participated, and I hope this is not a one-off, and I think one of the reasons it's not going to be is because the additional motion that Trustee Barrera put in terms of having this Independent Citizens Oversight Committee will be monitoring us every quarter as we're going along in terms of making sure that we are doing what we say we're going to do. So at this point, if there are no further comments, I want to thank everybody for their participation, for their patience. We've gone for about 4 hours, and everybody has held up very well. And you know, I know maybe some of you are not used to sitting through meetings that are quite this long, but we really appreciate it. And the whole point we said was for this particular workshop is we wanted to hear, above all, student voice. We have plenty of time to talk with staff and adults and everything about what's going on. I remember when I was in a meeting with board members from across the country, and they were talking about the whole issue of police on campuses, and one gentleman from one city said, well, I think they've been doing a pretty good job on our campus. And then the board member was either from St. Paul or from Minneapolis, began to talk about what do you think it is like for an African-American male seeing a uniformed armed officer on campus. And he said, you know what, I need to go back and rethink that, because from an adult point of view, it seemed fine, but from a student point of view, it's very different. So that's why it was so important to have the student perspective. I appreciate everybody's participation and the fact that people are speaking about things that are not always comfortable, but they're important to express the truth. And I just asked the superintendent, do you want to say any final words at this point after having heard all of this?
No, just thank you very much, Dr. Evans, and to all of our students for their voice and their helping us understand the students' experience in our district and the work that we have before us. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so the work begins tomorrow morning. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for your participation, and we will now adjourn the meeting until our next regular board meeting, which is next Tuesday, July 28th at 5 p.m. Thank you very much.
Well
Good
done,
evening.
President Evans.
Thank you. All right, bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, John.